Hi guys, tonight we step into a world that is beginning to change beneath early human feet. The fire is low, the air is cold, and beyond the circle of faint orange light, the dark land waits with the patience of something ancient. You hear branches creak, water moving somewhere nearby, and the soft breathing of people asleep beneath hides and woven grass. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Maybe it is past midnight, maybe the room is quiet, maybe the day has finally loosened its grip. Now, dim the lights and let yourself drift backward, far beyond cities, roads, clocks, and the small glowing screens that follow us around like needy little moons. You're waking at the edge of an early human camp. The morning is not bright yet. It is only beginning to gather itself in the east, where the sky holds a thin grey line above a low ridge of trees. The ground beneath you is cool and uneven. Dry grass presses against your palms. A faint mist lies close to the earth, clinging to stones, roots, and the dark shapes of sleeping bodies nearby. There is no village here. Not yet. No wooden fences, no fields, no clay pots lined neatly near a doorway. No sleepy neighbour complaining that someone's goat has eaten the garden again, because gardens are still a very distant idea. What exists here is movement, memory, skill, and attention. A small group of humans rests near a sheltered bend in the land, where a stream curves between scattered trees and open grass. The world around them is not stable in the way you might imagine a place should be. During this stretch of deep prehistory, early humans lived through powerful climate shifts. Ice advanced and retreated. Rainfall patterns changed. Forests expanded in some places and shrank in others. Herd animals moved with the seasons, and people had to move with them. That is a mainstream historical fact long before farming. Humans survived as hunter-gatherers, depending on wild plants, animals, water sources, and knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. You sit up slowly. The hide covering your shoulders has slipped during the night, and cold air slides along your skin. It is not the killing cold of deep winter, but it is enough to make you pull the covering closer, nearby. Someone stirs beside the last glow of the fire. Ash has settled over the embers like grey snow. A thin thread of smoke rises, carrying the smell of burned wood, old fat, and damp earth. It is a smell that means safety. Not perfect safety, of course. This is not the kind of world that signs a safety certificate and offers complimentary breakfast. But fire changes the night. Fire pushes back darkness. Fire warms hands, frightens some animals, helps cook food, and gathers people into a circle where faces can be seen. A child turns in sleep beside an older woman. The woman's hair is tangled, her face lined by years of wind and smoke. She wakes without surprise, as if her body has learned to listen even while dreaming. She looks toward the tree line, then toward the stream, then finally toward the sky. You follow her gaze. Something feels different. At first, it is hard to say what. The birds are quieter than they were in the last place you camped. The air carries a dry smell beneath the morning damp, as if leaves have fallen too soon, or as if the earth has forgotten some of its softness. Beyond the stream, the trees stand farther apart than expected. Between them, pale grassland opens in wide patches. The older woman notices it too. She says nothing for a while. People here do not waste words on things the eyes can understand. The group has been travelling for many days, following signs that are never as clear as anyone would like. Tracks in mud, broken stems, the distant movement of animals at dusk, patches of edible roots, berries that appear in one valley but not another, shells near old water lines, the memory of where water lasted during a dry season years before. To live here, You must read the world slowly. You must notice what is missing. You stand and walk toward the stream. The mud near the bank is marked by hooves, paws, and the soft pressed shapes of human feet. Some tracks are fresh, others are cracked at the edges, left before the last dry wind passed through. You crouch and touch one print with your fingers. The mud is cool, but not wet enough. A small concern moves through the camp. Not panic. Panic is too expensive out here. It wastes breath. It frightens children. It makes hands clumsy. Instead, concern becomes quiet activity. Someone checks a bundle of stone flakes wrapped in hide. Someone else lifts a digging stick and tests the point. A young man walks to the edge of the camp and studies the slope beyond the trees. Two children are told, gently but firmly, to stay close. Naturally, they take this as an invitation to move exactly 3 steps farther away, because apparently children have been children for a very long time. A quirky detail from prehistoric life is that some hunter-gatherer groups likely carried useful fire materials with them, such as embers, fungus, or dry tinder, because starting a flame from nothing could be difficult in damp or windy conditions. Imagine packing for a journey and thinking, yes, water, tools, food, children, and also a tiny sleeping fire. Honestly, not the worst travel checklist. You look across the land again. The trees are thinning. This does not happen in a single morning. Of course. The world does not change like someone pulling back a curtain. It changes in hints. A familiar plant fails to appear. A stream runs lower than remembered. Herds arrive later. Fruit ripens at the wrong time. Snow remains longer on a distant ridge, or vanishes sooner than elders expect. Researchers continue to question exactly how early humans understood these environmental changes, because they left no written diaries explaining their worries. No one carved. Very strange weather this year. Not ideal. 2 stars, but the evidence of tools, campsites, bones, pollen, and ancient landscapes suggest that human survival depended on noticing change and adjusting with patience. You return to the fire. The group is waking now. A baby fusses softly, then settles against a chest. Someone breaks a piece of last night's cooked root and shares it with a child. It is fibrous, earthy, and not especially exciting. Today we might complain if breakfast arrives without coffee, toast, or some little pastry pretending to be healthy. Here, food is food. It is warmth in the belly. It is another hour of walking. It is the difference between strength and weakness. The morning light spreads slowly. You can see more clearly now. The camp sits in a place chosen with care. A slight rise keeps it above damp ground. The stream offers water. Trees provide shade, branches, and some protection from wind. Open land nearby makes it easier to watch for animals. Nothing here is random. Even rest has been planned by people who know that comfort is useful only if it does not invite danger. A woman near the fire examines a stone blade, turning it in her hand until the edge catches the pale light. It is small, sharp, and precious. Tools like this are not just objects. They are stored effort. They are thought made solid. They carry the memory of hands that learned how stone breaks, where to strike, how to shape an edge that can cut hide, scrape wood, or prepare food. The world may be changing, but hands remember. That is one of the quiet miracles of being human. You look toward the older woman again. She has picked up a worn carrying pouch and is speaking softly to 2 others. Her gestures point upstream, then toward the open grass beyond the trees. The group will not stay long. Something about this place is useful, but not enough. The signs say that better food may lie farther on. Perhaps the herds have moved. Perhaps roots are more plentiful near wetter ground. Perhaps another group has passed this way and taken what was easy to gather. No one can know for certain, so the day begins with preparation. Hides are shaken out. Tools are wrapped, children are gathered, embers are coaxed carefully, protected for the next stop if they can be kept alive. The stream murmurs beside you, steady for now, though even that sound feels less certain than it should. You take one last look at the camp before leaving. A ring of ash, pressed grass, a few broken shells, footprints softening at the edges. In a few days, wind may blur almost every sign that people slept here. In many thousands of years, perhaps only a scatter of stone tools or charcoal will remain, waiting silently beneath soil for someone to find it and wonder who sat here, who woke here, who first noticed that the familiar world was beginning to change. You step away with the group as morning opens. Behind you, smoke thins into the air. Ahead, the land grows wider, colder, and less familiar, and you begin to understand that for early humans, history was not something written after the fact. It was felt underfoot, in the weather, in hunger, in memory, and in the quiet decision to keep walking. The trees continue to thin as you move farther from the place where the camp stood at dawn. At first the change feels almost invisible. A missing cluster of bushes, a wider gap between trunks, more sunlight reaching the ground. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make anyone stop walking and announce that history has arrived. Yet the landscape is speaking in small ways, and the people around you know how to listen. The morning grows brighter as your group follows a narrow route beside a shallow stream. Moisture still clings to the grass. Tiny droplets gather along leaves and catch the light. Every step brushes cool water against your ankles. Birds call occasionally from the remaining woodland, but the sounds are scattered now, less dense than before. The forest is changing, and with it, everything connected to the forest. Throughout prehistory, shifts in climate often transformed entire ecosystems. Regions that once supported thick woodland could gradually become more open grassland. In other places, forests expanded where cold conditions retreated. These changes affected plants, animals, migration routes, and ultimately the lives of the humans depending on them. You walk behind an older hunter whose attention never seems to wander. His eyes move constantly. Ground, trees, sky. Ground again. Nothing escapes his notice. A snapped branch, fresh droppings, marks left by hooves. Even silence itself appears to carry information. You begin to understand that survival here depends less on strength and more on observation. Modern people often imagine intelligence as something displayed in books, screens, or examinations. Yet here intelligence takes a different form. It lives in memory, awareness, patience, and pattern recognition. You're watching people read a landscape the way someone today might read a map. The stream bends eastward. Ahead, several women pause near a patch of low vegetation. They kneel and begin examining roots hidden beneath loose soil. One of them uses a digging stick polished smooth by years of handling. Children gather nearby watching carefully. Learning never stops in this world. There are no classrooms, no desks, no homework assignments waiting inside backpacks. Instead, knowledge moves through observation. A child watches an elder demonstrates. The lesson becomes survival. You crouch beside them. One route is accepted, another is discarded. The difference is subtle. Shape, colour, texture, tiny details separating nourishment from disappointment. Some researchers suggest that prehistoric children learned many practical skills surprisingly early, because daily survival required active participation from almost everyone in the group. While exact ages remain uncertain, archaeological evidence hints that knowledge transfer began long before adulthood. The women collect what they can. Not much, certainly less than expected. That fact does not go unnoticed. The soil feels drier, the roots are smaller, several familiar plants are absent altogether. Nobody complains. Complaining does not create food. Instead, observations are stored quietly. Another piece of information added to the growing picture. As the day progresses, the woodland continues to open. Large trees become less common. Grass stretches farther between patches of shade. Wind moves more freely across the land. You feel it brushing your face, carrying scents from distant places. Dry earth, animal musk, crushed vegetation, smoke from a fire that might belong to another group many miles away. Or perhaps much closer. There is no way to know. The uncertainty hangs gently over everything.
Not frightening.
Just present. By midday, the group pauses beneath one of the larger surviving trees. Its branches spread wide enough to provide welcome shade. People settle onto the ground. Children immediately transform into children. Within moments, they're poking sticks into ant trails, examining interesting rocks, and becoming fascinated by things adults stopped noticing years ago. Apparently, this is another timeless human behavior. One little boy discovers a beetle and becomes convinced it deserves everyone's attention. The beetle disagrees and attempts to leave. A brief negotiation follows. Lunch consists of gathered roots, stored plant foods, and scraps of dried meat carried from previous hunting success. The meal is simple, but valuable. Every bite represents effort. Every mouthful is connected to knowledge accumulated across generations. You chew slowly while listening to the wind moving through leaves overhead. The sound is different now. Less forest, more open space. Even the air seems larger. A mainstream historical fact is that hunter-gatherer groups often possess detailed environmental knowledge of enormous territories. They understood seasonal patterns, animal movements, edible plants, water sources, and safe travel routes with remarkable accuracy. Such knowledge was not optional. It was life itself. The older hunter who led the morning walk sits nearby sharpening a stone edge. Tiny flakes fall into the grass. Tap, turn, tap, turn. The rhythm is soothing. You watch sunlight flash briefly along the sharpened edge. Stone tools remain among humanity's greatest inventions. Simple in appearance, profound in consequence, a sharpened stone can process food, prepare hides, shape wood, and assist in countless daily tasks. The difference between a good tool and a poor one might determine whether a family eats during the coming days. Nearby, a discussion unfolds among several adults. The words are few. Gestures do much of the work. One points toward the horizon. Another traces a route through the air. The older woman from yesterday nods slowly. The conversation concerns movement. Always movement. Forest resources appear less reliable here. The group may need to travel farther than expected. You glance toward the landscape ahead. The view stretches wider now. Rolling grassland reaches into the distance, interrupted by clusters of trees that seem increasingly isolated. The sight is beautiful. But beauty and abundance are not always the same thing. Scholars remain divided on exactly how rapidly some prehistoric environmental changes unfolded in different regions. Certain shifts may have occurred over generations, while others happened quickly enough for individuals to notice significant differences during their own lifetimes. Imagine that, being born into one landscape and growing old in another, watching familiar places transform year by year, not because people built cities or roads, because climate itself was changing the rules. The afternoon journey resumes. The group moves steadily across terrain that feels increasingly exposed. Shade becomes precious. Water requires more attention. Tracks become easier to spot. So do dangers. Herd appears in the distance. Small at first, then larger as you focus. Animals moving slowly across the grass. The entire group stops. Every eye turns toward the herd. Food. Possibility. Information. The animals are not close enough for hunting today, but their presence matters. Where animals travel, humans often follow. Where animals find water, humans may find water too. The relationship between people and migrating herds shapes much of prehistoric life. You watch the animals disappear beyond a rise. The hunters exchange quiet looks. The direction has been noted. Another clue added to the map forming inside their minds. As afternoon fades toward evening, clouds gather overhead. Not storm clouds, only long pale streaks crossing the sky. The sunlight softens. Shadows lengthen. A cooler breeze arrives. Everyone seems relieved. The day's warmth had grown uncomfortable in the open terrain. You begin noticing something else. The group no longer looks surprised by the changing landscape. Concerned, perhaps. Attentive, certainly. But not surprised. This realization settles gently over you. These people expect change. Their lives have taught them that stability is temporary. Streams shift. Animals move. Plants flourish and disappear. Weather behaves unpredictably. The world remains alive because it changes. Perhaps that understanding makes adaptation easier. Or perhaps it simply makes adaptation necessary. Either way, the lesson feels timeless. As evening approaches, the group begins searching for a place to stop. Not too exposed, not too enclosed. Near water, good visibility, protection from wind, the same careful calculations repeated countless times across countless generations. Finally, a suitable location appears near a cluster of surviving trees. People begin unloading bundles. Children settle down. Tools emerge. The familiar routines return. Soon another fire will glow beneath the darkening sky. Another meal will be shared. Another night of stories, planning, observation, and rest. Behind you, the thinning forest fades into shadow. Ahead, open grasslands wait beneath the evening light. The world is changing one quiet step at a time. And you're beginning to see that early humans survived not because the world remained predictable. They survived because they learned how to notice when it no longer was. Morning comes across the open grassland with a pale silver softness. There are fewer trees now. You notice it before you fully wake. The air feels wider around your body, as if the night has no walls. Wind moves gently over the ground and slips beneath the edge of your hide covering. Somewhere nearby, the fire has faded to red coals. Smoke lies low, flattened by the cool breeze, carrying the faint smell of ash, dry grass, and last night's cooked food. You open your eyes to a sky that feels enormous. Above you, clouds drift slowly in long, thin bands. The first light has not yet warmed the land, so everything appears blue and grey. Grass bends in waves over the shallow slopes. Farther away, the remaining trees stand like dark islands scattered across a pale sea. This is a different kind of world. Less shelter, more distance, more sky, and more watching. Before people begin moving, the older members of the group sit quietly and look outward. They do not speak much, for there is no need. Everyone understands that open land asks for a different kind of attention. In a forest, danger may hide behind trunks and shadows. On grassland, danger may be visible from far away, but so are you. That is the trade. Early humans lived through many environments, including woodland, savanna, coast, river valleys, and colder open landscapes. A mainstream historical fact is that flexibility became one of the great strengths of the human species. Rather than surviving in only one narrow habitat, humans learned to adapt to many different kinds of land. You stand slowly, joints stiff from sleeping on uneven ground. The grass is cold against your ankles. Tiny seeds cling to your skin and clothing. Your fingers smell faintly of smoke. Around you, people begin the small, careful work of mourning. Someone breaks apart the ash bed to search for living embers. Someone checks bundles. A child is told not to wander toward the slope. The child looks personally betrayed by this reasonable instruction. A young woman crouches near a patch of flattened grass where an animal passed in the night. She studies the marks closely. The tracks are shallow but fresh enough to matter. Hooved animals, perhaps several, moving eastward before dawn. The group gathers. The day's direction begins to form. You walk with them into the open plain. At first, the grassland seems empty. Then your eyes adjust. There are insects moving near the stems, birds rising and settling, small burrows near patches of bare soil, distant animals whose shapes tremble in the morning haze. A line of darker vegetation marks a hidden watercourse far ahead. The land has not lost life. It has changed the way life is arranged. That difference matters. In the forest, food might be found in layered places, fruit above, roots below, small animals in brush, nuts beneath trees, leaves, bark, mushrooms, eggs, honey if luck and bravery make a questionable friendship. In open grassland, resources can be more spread out. Water may be farther apart. Herds may move across larger distances. Shelter can become scarce. You begin to feel the effort of walking. The ground rises and falls gently, but the distance wears on the body. There is little shade. The breeze helps at first, then dries your mouth. The sun lifts higher, spreading pale warmth across your shoulders. Everyone moves with a steady pace, not rushing, not drifting. Energy must be managed. This is not a world for dramatic running unless absolutely necessary. Most survival is quieter than that. A quirky but important detail is that prehistoric travel was often shaped by the need to carry children. Infants and toddlers cannot simply be told to keep up with migrating herds. Although one imagines many tired parents tried a prehistoric version of, "Come on, just a little farther." Carrying young children meant planning movement carefully, balancing food, tools, bedding, and the living weight of the next generation. You notice this as the group walks. One child rides against a woman's hip, wrapped in hide or woven fibre. Another older child walks for a while, then is carried by an older sibling. The smallest ones slow everything down, but they are also the reason everything continues. The grass brushes softly around your legs. Dry seed heads whisper. Occasionally a grasshopper springs away. The sound of the group becomes rhythmic. Feet pressing soil, bundles shifting, breathing, a flint edge clicking lightly against another tool. Somewhere to your right, a bird calls with a sharp note and then falls silent. At midday, the group reaches a low ridge. Everyone pauses. From here, the grassland opens even wider. Far below, a herd grazes near a winding strip of greener plants. The animals move slowly, heads lowering and lifting in the sun. Beyond them, the land rolls toward distant hills. No one shouts. No one celebrates. The sight is promising, but promise is not food yet. The hunters study the herd. Others study the watercourse, the wind, the slope, the possible routes down. Even the children become quieter, sensing adult attention sharpening around them. Researchers continue to debate how early humans coordinated hunts in different periods and regions. Some evidence suggests careful planning, cooperation, and knowledge of animal behavior, while other cases may have involved scavenging, trapping, opportunistic hunting, or following predators at a safe and deeply respectful distance. Respectful, in this case, means not being eaten. A gentle truth settles in your mind. Open grassland does not only demand stronger legs, it demands social intelligence. No single person can do everything. Some track, some gather, some carry, some remember routes, some care for children, some prepare tools, some notice weather, some hear danger first. The group survives because knowledge is shared across bodies, ages, and roles. You descend slowly from the ridge. The wind shifts. The hunters pause again. Direction matters. Scent matters. Sound matters. The herd below is alert, and the open land gives little cover. It is not yet time to act. Perhaps the group will watch. Perhaps they will move closer by evening. Perhaps they will decide the risk is too great and search elsewhere. To modern eyes, this might feel frustrating. We are used to wanting quick results. Click, order, deliver, done. But the ancient world does not care about convenience. It rewards patience, timing, and the ability to walk away from a bad chance. By afternoon, the group reaches the green strip near the watercourse. It is not a river, only a shallow flow hidden among reeds and damp soil. Still, it brings relief. People kneel to drink, hands cup water, children splash until reminded that drinking water is not apparently a private lake created for their entertainment. You drink too. The water's cool and slightly earthy. It tastes of mud, plants, and survival. Nearby, women examine the damp ground for edible roots and tubers. Men and older youths inspect tracks around the water. The herd has moved farther away, but signs remain everywhere. Hooves have cut into the soft bank. Droppings steam faintly in the warm air. Flies gather in tiny restless clouds. The world leaves clues. You only have to know which ones matter. As evening approaches, the group chooses a place to rest near a slight rise above the water. There are few trees, so shelter must be made from what can be carried and what the land provides. Hides are stretched low against the wind. Bundles become cushions. A fire is coaxed carefully from protected embers and dry grass. When the flame catches, everyone seems to breathe easier. The light glows against faces. The open land darkens around you. Far away, the herd shifts like shadow against the fading sky. You sit beside the fire and feel the day inside your legs. The walking, the watching, the thirst, the long patience of open ground. The sky fills slowly with stars. There are no ceilings here, no walls, no comforting sense that the world ends at the edge of a room. The night stretches in every direction, wide and ancient, and under it the group becomes a small circle of warmth. You think back to the thinning forest behind you. Then you look toward the grassland ahead. This is what change feels like for early humans. Not one sudden disaster, not one clear beginning, but a gradual widening of the world, asking new questions with every mile. Where is water? Where have the animals gone? What can be eaten here? Where is shelter? How far can children walk? How long can memory hold a route across land that keeps shifting? The fire crackles softly. Someone adds another branch. A child falls asleep with one hand still closed around a smooth stone collected during the day. The adults continue watching the dark, and you understand that the open plains are not empty at all. They are full of signs, risks, chances, and quiet lessons. Early humans are learning them one step at a time. The fire is already awake before most people are. You open your eyes to its gentle crackling. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady conversation between flame, wood, and air. The darkness of the grassland has not completely retreated yet. A pale glow rests along the eastern horizon, but the stars still linger overhead. The world exists in that quiet space between night and morning when everything seems to move more slowly. You lie still for a moment. The air feels colder than it did yesterday. A breeze slips across the open plain and finds every small gap in your hide covering. Nearby, someone shifts closer to the fire. Another person reaches out half asleep to adjust a burning branch. No one wants to leave the warmth. The fire has become the center of everything. Not just for comfort, for survival. You sit up and extend your hands toward the glowing coals. Heat brushes against your skin. Smoke drifts upward in twisting grey ribbons before disappearing into the fading darkness. The scent settles into your hair, your clothing, your memories. You have been travelling through a changing world for days now. The forest behind you continue to thin. The grasslands continue to widen. Water must be sought more carefully. Food requires more planning. Yet through all of these changes, one thing remains familiar. The fire, its light creates a small island of certainty in a landscape that seems increasingly unpredictable. Archaeological evidence suggests that controlled fire became one of the most important tools in human history. Long before farming, cities, or writing, people were using fire for warmth, protection, cooking, and social gathering. Few discoveries transformed daily life as profoundly. You watch the group slowly wake around it. The older woman who first noticed the changing landscape crouches beside the embers. She feeds small twigs into the coals with practiced movements. There is nothing hurried about her actions. She has likely performed the same task thousands of times, perhaps tens of thousands. The fire responds immediately. Tiny sparks rise. Orange light grows brighter. Warmth spreads outward. Soon the children begin stirring. One little girl crawls toward the fire carrying a smooth stone she found yesterday. Apparently the stone remains extremely important. Nobody knows why. Perhaps even she no longer remembers. The stone receives a brief inspection, then it is placed carefully beside her. Important business completed. The adults begin preparing for the day. A small meal is shared. Pieces of stored food pass from hand to hand. Nothing extravagant, nothing abundant, yet the mood feels calmer than it might have without the fire. There is something deeply human about gathering around a flame. Even today, people continue doing it. Campfires, fireplaces, candles, outdoor grills that somehow convince grown adults they have become masters of ancient survival after successfully cooking 3 sausages. Some habits endure. You study the flames as breakfast ends. The fire changes constantly. Every second creates a new shape, a new flicker, a new pattern of light, and yet somehow it remains familiar. Perhaps that is part of its power. The world outside the circle keeps changing. The fire changes too, but in a way people understand. As the sun rises higher, the group prepares to move once more. Before leaving, several adults perform a task that has become increasingly important: protecting the fire. One fascinating detail often overlooked is that many prehistoric groups may have carried smouldering materials from camp to camp, rather than creating new fires every day. Certain fungus, bark, or carefully preserved embers could remain usable for surprisingly long periods. You watch as glowing coals are prepared for travel. Not every ember survives, but enough often do. The idea feels strangely comforting. A small piece of yesterday travelling into tomorrow. The group begins walking. The fire does not stay behind completely. Part of it comes with you. Morning sunlight spreads across the grassland. The wind has strengthened slightly. Clouds move overhead in slow formations. You follow the others toward a distant rise where scattered trees break the horizon. The open landscape remains beautiful, yet it also feels exposed. Without the shelter of dense woodland, temperature changes become more noticeable. Cold mornings, warm afternoons, wind from every direction. The body must adapt continuously. This is where fire becomes even more valuable, not simply useful, essential. The group reaches a shallow depression near midday. Here the wind is weaker. Several people stop to search for edible plants while others inspect tracks crossing the area. You rest briefly beneath one of the few larger trees. Its shade feels precious. The bark is rough beneath your fingertips. Insects hum lazily among the branches overhead. For a while, everything feels peaceful. Then a child points toward the horizon. Several dark shapes move in the distance. Animals! A small herd. Far away, safe enough, but interesting. The hunters watch carefully. They do not chase. Not today. Instead, they observe distance, direction, speed, behavior. Information matters. The changing world has made information valuable, perhaps even more valuable than strength. Researchers examining prehistoric sites often find evidence that human groups became increasingly skilled at sharing knowledge across generations. Survival depended not only on individual ability but on collective memory. You can see that happening now. An older hunter points toward the herd. A younger hunter listens. Questions are asked. Gestures are exchanged. Experience moves from one mind into another. The lesson may prove useful days from now, or months, or years. The afternoon passes quietly. The group continues walking. Grass sways around your legs. Birds occasionally rise from hidden nests. A fox appears briefly on a distant slope before vanishing into the landscape. The world feels alive. Not crowded, not empty, balanced. By late afternoon, clouds gather in thicker formations overhead. The temperature begins to drop. Nothing severe, just enough to remind everyone that another cold night is coming. The search for a campsite begins. Finding the right place requires careful judgment. Too exposed and the wind becomes miserable. Too enclosed and visibility suffers. Too far from water creates one problem. Too close creates another. Eventually a suitable location is found near a cluster of low trees. The group settles into familiar routines. Bundles are unpacked. Children are gathered. Tools are checked. And once again, attention turns toward the most important task of evening: building the fire. You watch closely. Dry grasses, small twigs, larger branches, protected embers, patient hands. The process unfolds almost like a ritual. Not because it is mysterious, because it is practiced. The first spark of orange appears, then another. Soon flames rise into the cooling air. A collective sense of relief moves through the group. The difference is immediate. Darkness begins retreating. Faces become visible. Warmth returns. The camp feels complete. You settle near the edge of the circle. The smell of smoke drifts past. Wood pops softly. Children laugh at something that seems enormously important for approximately 20 seconds before being forgotten forever. Adults speak quietly. The stars emerge overhead. Looking upward, you realize how much the fire changes human experience. Without it, the night belongs largely to darkness. With it, people create a space of their own, a small zone of light carved from uncertainty. The evidence left behind at ancient campsites reveals just how important these fires became. Charcoal layers, burned bones, heat-altered stone, and hearth remains appear again and again across prehistoric landscapes. These traces survive long after the flames themselves disappear. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncover them and glimpse moments very much like this one. People sitting together, sharing food, sharing stories, sharing warmth, perhaps worrying about tomorrow, perhaps laughing at a child's fascination with a completely ordinary stone, perhaps staring into the fire the way you are now. The wind softens as night deepens, somewhere beyond the circle of light. Animals move through the darkness. You hear occasional rustling, a distant call, the whisper of grass shifting. Yet the fire changes how those sounds feel. Not gone, just farther away, less immediate, less threatening. You stretch your hands toward the warmth one final time. The flames dance across faces around you. Orange, gold, red. The same colors early humans watched countless generations ago. The same colors people still watch today. Civilizations will rise. Languages will change. Cities will appear. Empires will vanish. Yet this simple scene remains recognizable. A group of people gathered around fire at the end of a long day, seeking warmth, seeking comfort, seeking one another, and in a world that keeps changing beneath their feet, that small circle of light may be one of the most important things they possess. By morning, the animals have already moved. You know this before anyone says it. The grass beyond the camp is marked with fresh tracks, pressed deep where the soil stayed damp through the night. Hooves have cut narrow shapes into the mud near the water. Reeds bend in one direction, still holding the memory of heavy bodies passing through before dawn. Droppings lie scattered along the bank, dark and fresh enough to draw flies as the first light warms them. The herd was close. Now it is not. The group wakes into this knowledge quietly. No one looks surprised. Animals do not wait for humans to finish breakfast. Very rude of them, honestly, but completely understandable. The fire is fed one last time before the day begins. Smoke rises straight at first, then leans gently with the breeze. The air smells of wet reeds, old ash, and trampled grass. You wrap your covering tighter around your shoulders and watch the hunters gather near the water's edge. They are reading the morning, not in words, in marks, broken stems, the angle of tracks, how deeply hooves sank, how quickly flies gathered, which way the wind moved during the night. Everything matters. In a world transformed by shifting climate and changing landscapes, animals often became moving maps. Their migrations could reveal water, fresh grazing, sheltered valleys, seasonal routes, and distant opportunities. For hunter-gatherers, following animals did not simply mean chasing food, it meant understanding the wider pattern of the land. One well-supported finding from archaeology is that early humans relied on a broad knowledge of animal behavior, including migration, herd movement, seasonal availability, and the best places to encounter game. Bones found at ancient sites, cut marks on remains, and stone tools associated with butchery all show how important animals were to survival. You watch as an older hunter kneels beside the tracks. His fingers hover above them but do not disturb them. A younger man crouches beside him, listening. The older hunter points to one print, then another. He marks the direction with a small gesture of his hand. Eastward, toward the low hills. The herd is moving away from the watercourse, perhaps toward better grazing, perhaps toward another hidden stream, perhaps simply away from whatever unsettled them in the darkness. The group prepares to follow. Not quickly, not blindly. There is no wild rush across the plain. That sort of thing looks exciting in films and exhausting in real life. Here, people move with patience because distance is expensive. Every step uses energy. Every decision affects children, elders, tools, food, and tomorrow. The morning journey begins. You walk behind the trackers through grass still damp with dew. The sun rises slowly, turning the tips of the stems gold. Insects cling motionless at first, then begin stirring as warmth returns. A flock of birds lifts from the reeds behind you, wings beating softly in the pale air. The camp disappears. Only smoke remains briefly visible. Then even that thins into the sky. The tracks are clear at first. The herd passed through soft ground near the water, then crossed a stretch of low grass where prints appear as dark bruises in the soil. After that, the trail becomes harder to follow. The grass stands taller. The earth grows firmer. The herd spreads out. The older hunter slows. Everyone slows with him. You begin to understand that tracking is not just seeing marks. It is imagining movement. A hoof presses differently when an animal is walking calmly than when it is frightened. A broken stem can show direction. Droppings can show freshness. Birds disturbed ahead may reveal hidden motion. Silence can be a clue. The world is a book that keeps trying to close. The tracker keeps opening it. An interesting detail often overlooked is that some hunter-gatherer groups may have used persistence and patience rather than sudden speed. Humans are not the fastest animals, obviously. Place a human beside a horse, antelope, or deer, and the comparison becomes a little embarrassing. But humans can walk for long distances, manage heat through sweating, cooperate, and plan. In certain environments, endurance could become a powerful advantage. The sun climbs higher. The grassland brightens. You feel warmth gather on your back. The group pauses beneath a scattered cluster of trees where shade lies thinly over the ground. A child drinks from a skin bag and makes a face at the taste. The water is warm now, tasting faintly of leather and smoke. Still, nobody's offering sparkling mineral water with a slice of lemon, so the complaint remains silent. A few people search the nearby ground for edible plants. Others scan the horizon. The herd is not visible, but its absence is not failure. The trail continues. After a short rest, the group moves again. The land begins to rise in gentle folds. Grass gives way to patches of low scrub. Stones appear beneath your feet. The scent changes too. Less wet reed, more dry earth. Crushed herbs release a sharp smell when stepped on. The air feels clearer, wider, almost empty. Then from the top of a slope you see movement. Far below, the herd crosses a shallow valley. Bodies shifting together, heads lowering, tails flicking, calves staying close to adults. No one speaks. The group lowers instinctively. Even from a distance, the animals are alert. The hunters study them for a long time. Wind direction is checked. The slope is considered. So is cover. So is distance. So is fatigue. People who imagine prehistoric hunting as simple bravery miss the quieter truth. It requires judgment. A failed chase can waste precious energy. An injured hunter can endanger everyone. A frightened herd may vanish beyond reach for days. Different specialists interpret the evidence in varied ways when it comes to how often early humans hunted large animals compared with scavenging, trapping, fishing, or gathering. The surviving record is uneven. Bones preserve better than plants, and dramatic kills leave clearer marks than quiet meals of roots, nuts, eggs, or shellfish. So the picture is always partial. The group waits. Wind moves across the slope and lifts strands of hair from your face. A fly lands on your wrist. You resist the urge to slap it too loudly. The animals graze below. Time stretches. This is not the sharp excitement of pursuit. It is patience, the kind that makes minutes feel long and thought feel slow. Eventually, yes, the hunters decide not to approach. The wind is wrong. The animals are too alert. The cover is poor. A bad chance is left alone. This decision feels almost more impressive than action. Restraint is also a survival skill. The group moves along the ridge instead, keeping the herd in sight where possible. The goal may not be hunting today, it may be learning where the animals are going. Perhaps they will lead toward better water, perhaps toward a sheltered valley, perhaps toward other resources the people need. As afternoon softens, the herd drifts farther east. The group follows at a careful distance. Children grow tired. An elder walks more slowly. The pace changes to fit the whole group, because survival is not measured only by how fast the strongest can move. You think of the forest behind you again. There, food had been hidden in layers. Here, food moves across the horizon. In this open world, humans must become moving creatures too, not aimless, not lost, but responsive. Like the herds, like the birds, like the seasons. By evening, the herd has disappeared beyond the low hills, but the group has gained something valuable. Direction, signs, knowledge. They choose a campsite near a shallow hollow protected from wind. There is no perfect shelter, but there is enough. Dry branches are gathered from scrub and scattered trees. Protected embers are coaxed back to life. Smoke rises into the cooling air. You sit near the fire as darkness settles. The day's journey lingers in your legs. The children fall asleep quickly. Adults remain awake, discussing the animals in quiet voices. Gestures trace their movement through the valley. Tomorrow's path begins forming before the night has fully arrived. Beyond the camp, the herd is somewhere in the dark. Breathing, grazing, listening, moving whenever the land asks it to move. And here, beside the fire, humans do the same in their own thoughtful way. They follow, they remember, they decide. The world changes and animals choose different paths. So humans learn to choose them too. Hunger arrives quietly. It does not come like a monster from the dark. It comes as a hollow feeling beneath the ribs, a slower step, a hand resting a little longer on the stomach, a child asking for food twice, then falling silent when the answer is only a gentle look. By morning, the group has eaten what remains from yesterday's small stores. A few strips of dried meat, some roots gathered near the water, a handful of seeds and hard berries that must be chewed carefully. Nothing is wasted. Even crumbs are brushed from hide wrappings and pressed into waiting palms. The fire gives warmth. The land must give the rest. You stand near the edge of camp as pale light spreads across the hollow. Frost lies thinly on the grass, shining silver where the first sun touches it. The air smells of smoke, damp soil, and the sharp green scent of crushed plants. Someone coughs softly. Someone else lifts a bundle of tools and checks the bindings. The world is not empty, but it is not generous either. This is the lesson of changing land. When familiar forests shrink, when herds move unpredictably, when water becomes harder to trust, hunger becomes a teacher, not a kind one, perhaps, but a very persistent one. It forces attention toward new foods, better tools, sharper tracking, and quieter forms of cooperation. Evidence from prehistoric sites shows that early humans often used a wide range of foods, not just large hunted animals. Depending on place and season, diets could include roots, tubers, fruits, nuts, eggs, small animals, fish, shellfish, birds, insects, and whatever else could be safely gathered, caught, cracked, scraped, roasted, or persuaded to stop being difficult. That last category was probably large. You follow a small gathering party away from the camp. The hunters have gone in another direction toward the route of the herd, but not everyone can chase animals every day. Some members of the group search the lower slopes for plant foods. Others inspect burrows, nests, and damp ground. A few older children come along, carrying little baskets and more confidence than skill. The sun climbs slowly. The frost fades. As the ground warms, scents rise from the earth. Dry grass, old leaves, animal musk. The faint sour smell of wet soil near hidden roots. A woman kneels beside a patch of low plants. Their leaves are dull and narrow, easy to overlook. She tests the soil with her digging stick, then begins loosening it. The work is steady, not graceful, and harder than it looks. You kneel beside her. The soil resists. Small stones press into your palms. Roots cling to the earth as if personally offended by being breakfast. At last, a thick pale tuber emerges. The woman holds it up for the children to see. A lesson. Food can hide. Food can look ordinary. Food can require patience. One child reaches for a similar plant nearby. The woman stops him with a sharp glance and shakes her head. Similar is not the same. In this world, that difference matters more than anyone would like. A lesser-known detail from studies of hunter-gatherer life is that gathering plant foods often required deep botanical knowledge. People needed to know which parts were edible, which were seasonal, which needed cooking, which were dangerous, and which were simply disappointing in a way nature seems to enjoy. You move onward. The group spreads across the slope, never far apart. The grass whispers around your legs. Insects begin their tiny morning industry. A bird hops between stones, tilting its head, then darts away with something held in its beak. At a cluster of shrubs, berries are found. Not many, enough to matter. The children brighten instantly. Their hands move too quickly and are corrected. Some berries are ripe, some are not. Some may be better left alone. The older woman demonstrates again. Colour, softness, stem, smell. All must be noticed. You taste one. Tart. Small. Wonderful. Hunger makes flavour sharper. A single berry can feel like a gift. Farther on, a young man checks a line of small stones arranged near a burrow entrance. Perhaps a simple trap was set earlier, or perhaps he's improving a method someone has used before. The device is crude but clever, made of stone, stick, tension, and hope. Hope, as usual, does not guarantee results. Today it has caught nothing. He resets it anyway. This is another lesson hunger teaches. Try again. Not every effort feeds you immediately. Some efforts are investments in later luck. The picture becomes less certain when experts try to reconstruct exactly how early humans balanced hunting, gathering, trapping, and scavenging in different environments. Bones and stone tools often survive, while plant remains vanish more easily. This can make meat look more important in the evidence than it may have been in everyday meals. You look back toward the camp. Smoke rises faintly from the hollow. The group there must be waiting, not helplessly, never helplessly, but with a quiet awareness that the day's food is still being searched for. By midday, the gathering party has collected roots, berries, a few edible seeds, and several small eggs found in a ground nest. The eggs are handled carefully. The children stare at them with intense seriousness. Their expression suggests they understand the situation completely, although one of them is almost certainly thinking about throwing a stick at another child. The party returns slowly. The sun is warmer now. Your back aches from bending. Dirt has worked beneath your fingernails. The gathered food does not look like much. Certainly not a feast, but the faces at camp change when they see it. Relief does not need to be loud. It appears in softened shoulders, a longer breath, a child stepping closer. Food is sorted near the fire. The roots must be cooked. The eggs must be shared. Seeds are crushed with a stone on a flat surface, producing a faint, gritty sound. Tap, scrape, tap, scrape. The rhythm is sleepy and practical. Nearby, one of the hunters returns before the others. He carries no large meat, but he brings information. The herd has moved farther than expected. Tracks cross rocky ground, then fade. Another route may be needed tomorrow. He drinks, sits, and begins repairing a tool without complaint. Failure, yes, is not always dramatic. Sometimes failure is simply a long walk and empty hands. The group adjusts. Afternoon becomes a time of experiments. A tool edge is reshaped for scraping. A digging stick is hardened near the fire. A child learns to crack seeds without scattering half of them into the dirt, which is apparently more difficult than it sounds. The older woman shows two young people how to twist fibers into a stronger cord. The cord may bind a tool, carry a bundle, repair a shelter, or tie food out of reach of animals. Small technologies, quiet improvements. Nothing that looks impressive from far away. Everything that matters up close. You sit beside the fire as roots roast in the ash. Their smell changes slowly from raw earth to something warmer and sweeter. Smoke clings to the air. Children wait with heroic impatience. Adults pretend not to be impatient, which is one of the oldest forms of dignity. When the food is finally ready, it is divided, not equally in a mathematical sense. Wisely, children receive what they need. Those who walked far eat. Elders are not forgotten. The hunters take enough to continue functioning. No one eats until full, but everyone eats. That is the victory. Evening settles across the hollow. The day has not produced abundance. It has produced survival. You lean back and listen to the fire. Hunger has shown the group where old methods are not enough. It has pushed hands toward new tools, eyes toward smaller clues, minds toward careful memory. In a changing world, skill is not one thing. It is many little things gathered together. A route recognized, a trap reset, a blade sharpened, a child corrected before choosing the wrong berry, a cord twisted tighter, a fire kept alive. The night grows cooler. Someone adds wood to the flames. The sparks rise briefly, then vanish into the dark. You feel the day's work settle inside you, not as excitement, but as a deep, tired calm. Tomorrow hunger may return. It usually does. But so will hands. So will memory. So will the patient human habit of trying one more thing. The river is smaller than it should be. You notice it long before you reach the bank. The signs appear gradually throughout the morning. The ground grows drier beneath your feet. The grasses nearest the water lose some of their rich green colour. Mud that should feel soft instead cracks into delicate patterns beneath the sun. Tiny lines spread across the surface like a map drawn by time itself. The group has been following this river for 2 days. Or perhaps river is becoming too generous a word. A stream, a winding ribbon of water, a memory of something larger. Whatever name you choose, it has become important. Water shapes every decision around you. Where people rest, where animals travel, where plants thrive, where children can drink, where camps can survive another night. You walk through the cool morning air as the river twists across the landscape ahead. Mist still clings to the surface in places. Reeds sway gently along the banks. Small birds dart between them, flashing grey and white in the early light. For a few moments, everything seems peaceful. Then you look closer. The waterline is lower, not dramatically. Not enough to frighten anyone, but enough to notice. And in a world where survival depends on noticing, that matters. The older woman pauses beside the bank and studies the exposed mud. Others do the same. No words are needed. The river is telling a story. The question is whether anyone understands all of it. You kneel near the edge and place your fingers into the water. It feels cool. The current still moves steadily. Tiny insects skate across the surface. Fish occasionally disturb the water with quick flashes of silver. Life remains here. Yet something has changed. Across many prehistoric landscapes, shifts in rainfall could alter rivers, lakes, wetlands, and seasonal streams. Water sources expanded during some periods and shrank during others. Communities that depended upon these places had to adapt constantly to conditions that might look stable one year and completely different a generation later. You rise and continue walking. The river bends through a broad valley where patches of willow and brush cluster along the banks. Animal tracks cover the muddy ground. Hooves, paws, bird prints, human footprints from earlier visits. The place feels busy even when no one is present. The river draws everything toward it. You spot several children examining a collection of smooth stones near the water. One child proudly displays a rock shaped vaguely like an animal. At least according to him, to everyone else it looks remarkably similar to every other rock in existence. Still, admiration is offered. The stone joins yesterday's important stone collection. Archaeologists of the future would probably be delighted to discover these treasures and then spend years debating their significance. The children, meanwhile, simply think they look interesting. Sometimes the simplest explanation wins. As the day progresses, the group spreads out along the riverbank. Some gather edible plants. Others search for shellfish and small animals hidden among reeds and muddy shallows. A few hunters move farther downstream looking for signs of larger game. You follow a woman carrying a woven container made from plant fibers. She stops near a patch of broad-leafed plants growing in damp soil. Carefully, she begins harvesting. Not every plant, only certain ones, the best ones. The knowledge appears effortless, but it represents years of observation, knowledge accumulated by parents, grandparents, and countless people whose names will never be recorded. The surviving traces suggest that environmental expertise was among the most valuable forms of prehistoric knowledge. Knowing where resources appeared, when they appeared, and how long they remained available could mean the difference between comfort and hardship. The sun climbs higher, the valley warms, dragonflies begin hovering above the water. Their wings catch the light like fragments of glass. The river remains beautiful, yet concerns continue growing quietly beneath the surface. Around midday, several adults gather near a narrow section of the channel. You approach. The reason becomes obvious. An old bank stands exposed several feet above the current water level. The mark is clear. At some point, the water flowed higher, considerably higher. Everyone studies it. Nobody smiles. Nobody panics either. This is simply another piece of information. Another clue. Another adjustment waiting to happen. A curious observation emerges from ancient lake beds and river sediments across various parts of the world. Layers of mud, pollen, and microscopic remains sometimes reveal dramatic environmental changes that unfolded long before written history. Entire landscapes could transform over centuries, leaving subtle signatures preserved beneath the ground. The afternoon passes in thoughtful work. Food is gathered, water containers are filled, tracks are examined. The group moves slowly along the shrinking river, learning as they go. You notice how often people stop to observe a broken branch, a muddy depression, a cluster of animal prints, the angle of reeds bent by wind or movement. Nothing escapes attention for long. The river may be changing, but people are changing with it. Adaptation rarely arrives as a grand invention. More often it appears as hundreds of tiny observations accumulated over time. One person notices lower water. Another notices fewer fish. Someone remembers a spring farther north. Someone else recalls a wet valley visited years earlier. Knowledge spreads through conversation and memory. Piece by piece, late in the afternoon, a hunter returns carrying news rather than meat. Several larger animals cross the river farther upstream. The crossing point may become important. Perhaps water remains deeper there. Perhaps vegetation is healthier. Perhaps the herd has discovered something worth following. The information passes through the camp quickly. Plans begin shifting. Tomorrow's route may change. You sit beside the river and watch sunlight ripple across the surface. For all its uncertainty, the water still possesses a calming rhythm. Small waves touch the shore. Reeds whisper. A fish rises briefly. The sounds blend together into something soothing. You understand why people return to rivers whenever possible. Water is more than a resource. It becomes a companion, a landmark, a source of memory. Children remember rivers. Adults remember rivers. Generations remember rivers. Sometimes long after they have changed. No one can say with complete certainty how early humans interpreted environmental shifts occurring over decades or centuries. Did they see them as natural cycles? Did they connect them to stories, traditions, or spiritual beliefs? The evidence leaves many questions unanswered. The landscapes survive. The explanations often do not. As evening approaches, the group searches for a place to rest. They choose a slightly elevated bank overlooking a broad curve in the river. The location offers visibility, access to water, and enough dry ground for sleeping. Fires are prepared. Children wash dirt from their hands. Tools are inspected. Food gathered during the day is sorted carefully. The familiar routines return once again. You help collect dry branches from a nearby stand of shrubs. The wood snaps sharply when broken. A good sign. Dry fuel. Reliable fuel. Soon flames begin dancing against the growing darkness. Orange light reflects on the river surface. The water carries the reflections away in trembling patterns. For a while, everyone watches. The river, the fire, the sky. 3 moving things. 3 things impossible to hold still. Night settles slowly across the valley. Stars appear one by one. The river becomes darker. Its edge is harder to see. Only the sound remains, soft water slipping past reeds and stones. You lie near the fire and listen. The river's changing. The people know it. Tomorrow may bring new choices, new routes, new uncertainties. Yet tonight there is still water nearby. There is still warmth. There is still food enough for another day. And beneath the stars, the steady sound of the current reminds you that change is not always sudden. Sometimes it arrives quietly. A little less water, a slightly lower bank, a memory of how things used to be, and sometimes those small changes reshape entire human journeys. By the next morning, everyone is carrying something. Some carry tools, some carry food, some carry sleeping hides wrapped tight with cord. Some carry children who have decided with impressive timing that their legs no longer work. You walk beside the river as mist rises from the water in pale ribbons. The low sun turns the surface silver. Reeds brush softly against one another, making a dry whispering sound. Birds move through the damp grass, quick and secretive, while insects begin their tiny work above the mud. The camp behind you is already fading into the landscape. A ring of ash, flattened grass, footprints near the bank, a few scraps too small to matter. Soon wind and rain will soften even those signs. The group is moving again, not because the place was useless. It had water, it had plants, it had shelter enough. But the river is changing, and the animals have moved, and the people cannot afford to love one place too stubbornly. That is a difficult kind of wisdom. Modern life often teaches us to stay, store, build, protect, and lock the door. This older world teaches something different. Stay when staying helps. Leave when leaving must happen. The morning begins with careful order. No one simply wanders off into the brightening day. The adults check bundles, count children with their eyes, divide loads, and choose who walks where. The strongest do not all move at the front. The most experienced do not all walk alone. The group arranges itself like a living shelter around its most vulnerable members. Ancient campsites and human remains suggest that early humans often survived through cooperation, rather than individual strength alone. Care for children, elders, injured people, and skilled knowledge keepers may have been central to group survival. The story of humanity is not only about sharp stones and strong hunters. It is also about carrying one another. You notice this as the day unfolds. An older man walks slowly near the center of the group. His knee seems stiff, perhaps from an old injury. He carries little, but people still listen when he speaks. He points toward distant hills and names a place from memory, or perhaps he describes it with gestures, sounds, and fragments of shared experience. The exact words are lost to time. but the meaning is clear enough. He remembers a sheltered valley. He remembers water there. Maybe memory is useful, but it is not magic. The group follows the river for a while and turns away from it. This feels strange. The sound of water fades behind you. The air grows drier. Grassland rises ahead, pale under the morning light. Low shrubs dot the slopes. Farther away, the land lifts into darker ridges where patches of trees cling to sheltered ground. Children resist the new direction immediately. They look back at the river as if the adults have forgotten something obvious. Water is there. Why leave water? A fair question, honestly, but adults in every age have had to make unpopular logistical decisions. The group moves onward. The smallest child begins crying after a short climb. Not loudly, just with the tired, offended sorrow of someone who did not request to live through prehistory today. A woman adjusts her load, shifts the child higher against her shoulder, and keeps walking. Another adult takes one of her bundles without discussion. No speech is needed. The burden changes hands. The journey continues. Hidden inside this simple moment is one of the great strengths of human life. People share weight, not always perfectly, not always fairly, but often enough to survive. A small but revealing clue from archaeological research is that some prehistoric individuals lived for years with serious injuries or physical conditions that would have made survival difficult without help. Their bones suggest they were fed, protected, or supported by others. That quiet evidence feels almost tender, like a handprint left in deep time. The sun climbs higher. The grass dries around your legs. Bundles rub against shoulders. The smell of smoke remains in clothing and hair. Following the group like a portable memory of a last night's fire, you walk behind two children who whisper to each other while pretending not to be tired. One carries a small stick like a spear. The other carries nothing, but appears to consider this a wise division of labour. Every so often, they glance at the adults and imitate their serious scanning of the landscape. Learning again. Always learning. They are not separate from survival. They are inside it. By midday, the group reaches a shallow rise and stops. From here, you can see the river far behind. A dark thread through the valley. Ahead, the land dips toward a sheltered basin with scattered trees and a possible line of green vegetation. The older man studies it for a long time. Others wait. The question is not only where to go, it is whether memory can be trusted. Perhaps the valley still holds water. Perhaps it has dried. Perhaps another group has already settled there. Perhaps predators shelter among the trees. Perhaps the memory belongs to a wetter year, when the world behaved differently. No one can answer from the ridge. They must go closer. The surviving evidence leaves gaps in how early humans made decisions during migration. Archaeologists can find tools, hearths, bones, shells, pigments, and footprints, but not the full conversations that guided movement. We can see where people went. We cannot always hear why. The group rests briefly. Food is shared. A few berries, cooked root from yesterday, a little dried meat. The meal is not enough to satisfy hunger, but it steadies the body. Wind moves over the ridge, cool despite the sun. It carries the smell of dry grass and distant trees. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. Cloth rustling, a child chewing, a stone tool being adjusted, someone breathing deeply. The world feels large, but the group feels close. After resting, the descent begins. The basin ahead offers more shelter than the open plain. Trees gather along its lower edge. Their leaves flicker in the breeze. The air grows slightly cooler as you move downward. Shadows lengthen beneath the branches, and the ground becomes softer underfoot. Then someone finds damp soil. Not water yet, but dampness. People slow. A child points excitedly at reeds. Reeds mean moisture. Moisture might mean water. The adults follow the sign, careful not to hope too quickly. A narrow spring appears among stones at the base of the slope. Small, clear, alive. Water gathers in a shallow pool before slipping into grass. The relief is quiet but unmistakable. Hands cup water. Children drink. The older man sits nearby, breathing hard, watching the spring with an expression that might be satisfaction. His memory has held. Not perfectly, not loudly, but enough. The group begins making camp near the spring, choosing a dry patch protected by trees. Loads are lowered, shoulders relax. Children rediscover energy the moment adults stop moving, a phenomenon still observed in many households today. Soon the fire is prepared, branches are gathered, tools are unwrapped, a shelter is repaired. The place becomes temporary home. You sit near the spring as evening light turns golden through the trees. Water whispers over stone. The group settled around you, tired but safe for now. You understand that movement is not only about feet crossing land. It is about trust. Trust in memory. Trust in shared labour. Trust that someone will carry the child when the mother tires. Trust that an elder's old knowledge still matters. Trust that the group, moving together, can become stronger than any one body within it. Night approaches softly. Smoke rises through branches. The spring continues speaking in its small, clear voice. And after a day of walking away from certainty, the group has found another place where sleep may come. The cold comes down after sunset. Not all at once. It arrives patiently, first as a coolness in the grass, then as a thin bite in the air, then as a quiet pressure against your fingers, your ears, the back of your neck. By the time the sky has darkened fully, everyone has moved closer to the fire. The camp near the spring feels safer than the open grassland, but safety does not mean comfort. Trees stand around the clearing, their branches dark against the stars. The small spring murmurs over stone nearby, almost hidden in shadow. Smoke rises in slow, twisting lines, then catches under the lower branches before thinning into the night. You pull your hide covering tight. It smells of old smoke, animal fat, earth, and many journeys. It is not soft in the way modern blankets are soft. No gentle cotton, no neat stitched border, no washing machine performing its small domestic miracle in another room. This covering is heavier, rougher, and far more precious. It carries warmth because someone prepared it, scraped it, dried it, softened it, carried it, and protected it from damp. Cold makes every useful thing more valuable. Earlier in the day, the group had rested near the spring with relief. Water was found, a campsite chosen, food gathered in small amounts. But as night settles, another ancient problem returns. How do you keep bodies warm when the world is colder than the body can bear? The material record tells us that early humans developed many ways to survive cold conditions, including fire use, shelters, clothing, bedding, and careful campsite selection. These were not luxuries. In harsh environments, they were technologies as important as stone blades. You watch a woman working beside the fire. She holds a hide across her knees and uses a stone scraper to clean its inner surface. Her movements are steady. Scrape, pause, turn, scrape again. The hide catches firelight in dull brown and amber tones. Bits of dried tissue fall away onto the ground. Nearby, another person twists plant fibers into cord. A young man repairs a binding on a tool. An older child shakes out bedding grass and carries it toward a sleeping place beneath a low shelter. No one announces, "We are inventing survival technology tonight." They simply work. That is often how history happens. Quietly, under cold stars, with sore hands. The shelter itself is simple. Branches lean together, covered partly with hides, brush, and grass. It will not win any architectural awards, but it breaks the wind, and breaking the wind matters. Even a small barrier can make the space behind it feel dramatically warmer. You crawl closer to the shelter and touch the ground. Layers of dry grass and leaves have been placed beneath sleeping hides. This is clever. The earth steals heat, A body placed directly on cold ground loses warmth quickly. Bedding creates a buffer. It is one of those ideas that seems obvious only after someone else has suffered enough to discover it. Buried within prehistoric evidence are hints that some groups used plant materials, hides, and prepared sleeping areas to make cold nights more manageable. These traces rarely preserve well, which is deeply inconvenient for anyone trying to reconstruct ancient comfort. Stone tools are loyal, grass bedding is not. The fire cracks softly behind you. A child sneezes. Someone laughs under their breath. The sound is brief but warm. You notice how the group arranges itself for the night. Children are placed near adults. Elders settle close to the fire, but not so close that sparks threaten bedding. Those who wake easily remain toward the outer edges. Tools rest within reach. Fuel is stacked nearby for the night. Every choice carries memory. Every arrangement has probably been adjusted by years of cold, smoke, accidents, and sleepy mistakes. One child complains that another child has taken more space. This, too, is timeless. The older woman settles the dispute with a look so powerful it could probably stop a charging animal, or at least make it reconsider its priorities. Peace returns. For a while, you sit beside the fire and warm your hands. The heat feels almost too strong on your palms while your back remains cold. You turn slowly, like meat being roasted, except less dignified. Above the trees, the stars are sharp. The sky looks close enough to touch and impossibly far away at the same time. You begin to understand how cold nights shape human behavior. They draw people inward. They encourage cooperation. They make fire central. They make clothing necessary. They make shelter more than a place to sleep. In cold, a group becomes a shared warmth system, which sounds terribly modern. But here it is, just life. Several explanations have been proposed for exactly how and when early humans developed more complex clothing. Needles made of bone appear later in the archaeological record, but earlier clothing may have been made with simpler tools, a wrapping, tying, scraping, and piercing methods that left fewer traces. The evidence is partial, and the cold does not politely preserve every answer. Still, you can see the logic of it. A hide over shoulders, cord around the waist, fur turned inward, hands tucked under arms, bodies near bodies. The group eats a small evening meal, roots softened in ash. A little meat, if any, remains. Seeds crushed and warmed. Steam rises faintly from food held near the fire. The smell is earthy, smoky, and deeply comforting. Hunger makes the meal valuable. Cold makes it sacred. You chew slowly. The warmth travels downward. Not enough to make you full, enough to make you grateful. After eating, work continues in slower ways. A tool is repaired. A hide is folded. Someone checks the stored embers. Another person adds wood and watches the flames climb. The night deepens. Beyond the firelight, the forest edge becomes a wall of darkness. You hear small movements there. Leaves shifting, a twig snapping, perhaps a night animal passing through, perhaps only wind. No one rushes to investigate, because no sensible person hears a strange sound in deep prehistory and thinks, yes, I should definitely wander over there. The fire remains the boundary. Light inside, darkness outside. The children begin to sleep first. Their earlier complaints soften into breathing. One child curls against an adult's side, hand tucked beneath a hide. Another falls asleep, still holding the important stone from previous days. The stone has now travelled across landscapes and survived several changes of camp. Its official role remains unclear, but its emotional importance appears beyond question. You lie down near the shelter opening. The ground beneath you is still hard, but the bedding softens it slightly. Smoke drifts over you in faint waves. Your face feels cool while the rest of your body slowly gathers warmth beneath the hide. You listen. Fire crackling, spring murmuring, wood settling, people breathing. wind brushing branches overhead. The sounds weave together until they feel like one slow rhythm. Cold nights are not merely obstacles. They teach. They reward preparation. They punish carelessness. They make people notice dampness, wind direction, fuel supply, shelter placement, clothing, and the needs of the youngest and oldest members of the group. The world outside may be changing, but here, in this small protected place, humans are answering change with invention. Not with machines, not with walls of stone, not yet with scraped hides, dry grass, careful fire, shared bodies, and knowledge passed hand to hand in the glow of embers. Your eyes grow heavy. The flames blur. Someone rises quietly to add more wood. The fire brightens once, then settles. Cold remains beyond the shelter. It presses against the night, but it does not enter completely, and that is enough. For now, enough is everything. Morning arrives beneath a strange sky. At first, you're not sure what feels different. The spring still murmurs over stone. The trees still sway gently in the breeze. The fire still glows beneath a layer of pale ash. Children still wake slowly, rubbing sleep from their eyes while adults begin the familiar routines of another day. Yet something overhead captures attention. The clouds. You step away from the shelter and look upward. Long bands of pale grey stretch across the sky in uneven layers. Some are thin enough for sunlight to shine through. Others gather into thicker formations toward the western horizon. The shapes seem unusual, though perhaps that feeling comes only from spending so much time outdoors. Modern people often forget how much sky surrounds them. Roofs hide it, walls frame it, schedules distract from it. But here the sky dominates every day. It influences travel, food, warmth, water, and survival itself. You cannot ignore it. The people around you do not ignore it either. Several adults pause during their morning tasks and glance upward. No one speaks. No one needs to. Weather has become part of everyone's attention. A changing world teaches people to watch. The group eats a small breakfast near the fire. Roots roasted the previous evening. A few remaining berries, water from the spring, nothing luxurious, but enough to begin moving. As you chew slowly, a cool wind slips through the trees. It carries unfamiliar scents from distant places. Damp soil, rain perhaps, or maybe only moisture trapped among faraway hills. The uncertainty lingers. You remember the shrinking river, the wandering herds, the thinning forests. Now even the sky seems less predictable. Across many prehistoric regions, changing climate patterns altered rainfall, temperature, vegetation, and animal behavior. People who depended directly on the landscape had little choice but to become careful observers of seasonal rhythms. You wonder what these early humans think when weather changes unexpectedly. Do they expect explanations? Do they search for meaning? Do they tell stories? The evidence rarely preserves beliefs as neatly as it preserves stone tools. A blade survives. A conversation beside a fire does not. The group prepares to leave the spring after filling containers and gathering supplies. Before departure, an older woman pauses near the water and studies the sky again. She narrows her eyes slightly, then she points west. Several others follow her gaze. Clouds continue building there. Not threatening, not yet, but noticeable. The journey begins. You move through rolling terrain where grasslands blend gradually into patches of woodland. Wind brushes against your face. Small leaves tremble overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls repeatedly, its voice carrying farther than expected through the cool morning air. The land feels suspended between seasons. Not fully one thing, not fully another. Much like the world itself, a child walking ahead suddenly points toward the horizon. Everyone looks. High above, a line of dark birds crosses the sky. Their formation bends and shifts as they travel. For several moments the group watches silently. Then the birds disappear into the distance. Tiny moments like this seem ordinary. Yet they become important when survival depends on noticing movement. Birds may suggest water, animals, changing weather, or nothing at all. The challenge lies in knowing the difference. One small clue preserved in prehistoric sites comes from seasonal patterns of animal remains. Certain species appear only during particular times of year, suggesting that ancient people closely followed cycles in nature, sometimes returning to the same locations when resources became available again. The morning continues, the clouds continue gathering. By midday, sunlight has become softer. The air feels heavier, not unpleasant, just different. You sit beneath a tree while the group rests. Leaves flutter above your head. Their shadows shift across the ground in restless patterns. Nearby, several children invent a game involving sticks, pebbles, and rules that appear to change every few minutes. Human creativity, it seems, requires very little equipment. The adults use the break differently. They examine tools, check bindings, study the horizon, drink carefully. Energy must be managed. Weather may change. Travel plans may change. Food opportunities may change. Flexibility remains one of the group's greatest strengths. As afternoon approaches, the first distant rumble reaches your ears. You almost mistake it for imagination. A low sound, soft, brief, then gone. You look toward the west. Clouds have grown darker, not black, not violent, but substantial. The kind of clouds that demand attention. Several people stop walking. The older woman listens. The hunters listen. Even the children become quiet. The sound comes again. A distant roll moving across the horizon. Thunder. You feel something unexpected. Not fear exactly, more like respect. Storms possess a different power in this world. Today we receive weather forecasts through phones, television broadcast, satellite imagery, and helpful icons showing tiny cartoon clouds. Here there are no forecasts, only observation, only experience, only judgment. The group begins searching for shelter. Not panic, preparation. A cluster of larger trees appears ahead near a shallow depression in the landscape. The location offers some protection from wind and perhaps from rain. Everyone moves toward it. Bundles shift. Children are gathered closer. The pace increases slightly. The air changes again. The smell arrives before the rain. Wet earth. Leaves. The metallic scent that often accompanies distant storms. You inhale deeply. The entire landscape seems to be holding its breath. A fascinating mystery remains hidden behind scenes like this. We know ancient humans endured countless storms, droughts, cold periods, and environmental shifts. Yet how they interpreted these experiences emotionally remains difficult to reconstruct. Did thunder inspire fear or familiarity? Different groups may have viewed the same sky in entirely different ways. The first drops fall during late afternoon. Not many, only scattered impacts against leaves, a soft tapping sound. Then more. Rain begins moving through the trees in gentle waves. People settle beneath available cover. Hides are adjusted. Tools are protected. Children crowd together, half curious and half annoyed. The rain never becomes severe. Instead, it remains steady, calm, persistent. Water drips from branches. Small streams form in low ground. The smell of damp earth grows stronger. You sit beneath a sheltering tree and watch droplets strike leaves, one after another. Tiny flashes of movement, tiny sounds, tiny reminders that the world remains alive. The rain continues for nearly an hour, then slowly fades. Clouds begin breaking apart. Light returns. Not bright sunlight. Soft evening gold. The landscape shines with moisture. Grass glitters. Leaves sparkle. The air feels fresh and clean. The group emerges from shelter. The storm has passed. No damage. No disaster. Only change. Another example of the world shifting without asking permission. A campsite is chosen nearby. The ground remains damp, but the trees offer protection. Fire becomes more difficult tonight. Dry fuel must be found beneath branches and inside dead wood where rain has not fully reached. You watch as several people work patiently to coax flame from protected embers. It takes time. Several attempts. Careful effort. At last smoke appears, then flame. A small victory. The group gathers around it as evening settles. Steam rises faintly from drying hides. Children warm their hands. Adults speak quietly. Above them, the clouds continue drifting eastward. The strange sky that began the day now reveals scattered stars. You lean back and watch them emerge one by one. The weather changed. The land changed. The plans changed. Yet once again the group adapted, not because they controlled the world around them, because they paid attention to it. The fire crackles softly. The damp scent of rain lingers in the air, and somewhere beyond the trees, beneath the clearing sky, the ancient landscape continues its endless conversation with those willing to watch. The air changes before you see the water. It arrives as a taste first, faint salt on your lips, a cool dampness moving through the morning breeze, a smell unlike the river, unlike the spring, unlike the wet earth after rain. Sharper, wider, restless. You walk with a group across low hills where grass bends under the wind. The land has been sloping gently for hours, though no one said much about it. The trees have become shorter here, shaped by weather. Their branches lean in one direction, as if the wind has spent years giving advice and the trees finally gave up arguing. Then the sound comes, a deep, repeated breathing from beyond the rise. Was striking earth, withdrawing, returning, again. The group slows. Children lift their heads. Adults look toward the horizon. You climb the final slope and see it spread before you. The coast. Grey-blue water stretches farther than the eye can follow. Waves roll toward a narrow shore lined with stones, shells, dark seaweed, and pale sand. The sky above it feels enormous. Gulls wheel and cry in the wind. Their voices sound rough and lonely, but also alive. For a moment, no one moves. The sea is not like a river. A river leads somewhere. A spring begins somewhere. The sea simply exists, vast and moving, as if the world has opened its mouth and begun breathing in its sleep. You stand with the others and feel the wind push against your clothing. It carries salt, cold water, rotting seaweed, fish, and distant rain. Not exactly perfume, but promising. The coast offers food in a different language. Shellfish clinging to rocks, fish trapped in pools, seabirds and eggs, plants near wetlands, driftwood carried from somewhere else, fresh water sometimes flowing down to meet the tide. Across many parts of the world, prehistoric coastlines provided rich resources for human groups, shell middens, stone tools, fish bones, and coastal campsites show that people learned to use shorelines long before written history. Some of those ancient sites now lie underwater because sea levels changed after the Ice Age, which is very inconsiderate of the ocean from an archaeological perspective. The group descends carefully toward the shore. The ground becomes softer underfoot. Sand shifts beneath your weight. Tiny shells crunch quietly. Children immediately begin collecting objects from the beach because apparently no landscape in prehistory can exist without becoming a museum of important stones, shells, and sticks. One child holds up a spiral shell. This time, to be fair, it really is beautiful. The older woman examines it briefly, then gestures for the child to keep it if she wishes. Small objects like shells, pigments, and unusual stones sometimes appear far from their natural sources in prehistoric sites. Whether they were ornaments, tools, gifts, markers of memory, or simply beloved objects is not always clear. The clues remain. The feelings behind them drift away. You walk toward a cluster of dark rocks exposed by the tide. Water gathers in pools between them, clear enough to reveal tiny moving creatures. Small crabs vanish into cracks, limpets cling firmly to stone, mussels cluster in rough blue-black patches, seaweed lies slick and shining, smelling strongly of salt and life. A woman kneels and begins working with a stone tool. She pries shellfish from the rocks with practiced patience. Another person shows a child how to twist and pull without breaking too much of the shell. The child tries, fails, tries again, and looks deeply betrayed by the stubbornness of seafood. The ocean, like roots and stones, does not make things easy just because someone is hungry. You crouch beside a tide pool. The water is cold around your fingers. A tiny fish flickers away beneath a shadow. Sunlight trembles over the rippled surface. The pool is a small world, complete and fragile, refreshed by every returning tide. This place feels generous, but it is not simple. The sea has rules. Tides rise. Waves change. Rocks become slippery. Storms arrive quickly. Fresh water must still be found. Salt water cannot be drunk. The coast offers many resources, but it also asks for new knowledge. You look back at the group spreading along the shore. Some search among rocks, some gather driftwood, some watch the birds. Others study the slope behind the beach, where a stream may descend from inland ground. The group is learning again, not from a teacher standing at the front of a room, pointing at a helpful diagram, from wind, from water, from hunger, from memory, from the uncomfortable discovery that a wet rock is less trustworthy than it appears. By midday, the tide has pulled farther back. More rocks emerge. More shellfish are exposed. The group works quickly but not carelessly. Gather too little and hunger remains. Gather too much from one place and tomorrow may become harder. Whether early coastal people understood resource management in the same way, modern researchers describe it as impossible to know. But long experience would have taught them that overusing a place could make return less rewarding. The meal begins near a sheltered hollow above the beach. A fire is started with difficulty because the air is damp and many pieces of driftwood are wet. Smoke thickens, stinging the eyes. People cough softly and shift around it. Eventually the flames strengthen. Shellfish are placed near the heat. Soon their smell fills the air. Briny, rich, slightly strange if you are not used to it. Very welcome if you're hungry. Some shells open with soft clicks. Children watch this with serious fascination, as if the food has performed a trick. You eat slowly. The flesh is warm, salty, and tender. It tastes of the sea itself, different from roots, different from meat, different from berries gathered on dry slopes. Another world entering the body. Around you the group relaxes. Not completely, never completely, but enough. The coast is provided. The afternoon becomes softer. People repair tools, dry hides, and search for more resources along the shoreline. A hunter finds bird tracks in damp sand. A child discovers that gulls do not enjoy being chased, though the gulls seem fully prepared to express their opinion loudly. The sky clears. Sunlight spreads across the water in broken silver paths. Waves continue their endless movement. You sit above the beach and watch foam slide over sand, then vanish. There is something calming about the tide. It comes and goes without asking. It erases footprints. It returns gifts. It hides dangers. It teaches rhythm. For early humans facing a changing world, coasts may have served as corridors, refuges, food sources, and meeting places. Yet many ancient shorelines from colder periods are difficult to study today, because later rising seas covered them. It means part of humanity's story is underwater now, resting quietly beneath waves, beyond easy reach. Evening approaches. The group chooses to remain near the shore. Shelter is made behind a low-rise where wind is weaker. Driftwood, dry grass, and carried hides form a rough camp. The fire burns low but steady. Shells accumulate nearby, pale against the darker sand. A record in the making, not for the people here. For them it is simply dinner. The sunset spreads pink and gold across the horizon. The sea darkens beneath it. Children fall asleep to the sound of the waves, perhaps after finally surrendering their shell collections to a safe place beside the bedding. Adults sit awake a little longer, watching, listening, thinking about tomorrow. The coast has given new possibilities. Food that waits in pools, wood carried by water, birds nesting in cliffs, roots along the edge of land. But it has also introduced new uncertainty. The tide will rise. The weather may turn. The sea may be gentle tonight and dangerous tomorrow. You lie near the fire with salt still on your skin. The waves breathe in the darkness. In, out. In, out. The sound settles into you, and you understand that when the world changed for early humans, it did not only take things away. Sometimes it opened strange new doors. Sometimes it led tired feet to the edge of the sea. And there, beneath gull cries and fading light, people learned another way to live. The morning begins with stone, not the cliffs behind the beach, not the rocks scattered along the shoreline, not the smooth pebbles children continue collecting as if they are preparing to open the world's first prehistoric gift shop. This morning begins with tools. You wake to the sound before you fully open your eyes. Tap, pause, tap, turn, tap. The rhythm drifts across the camp like a quiet form of music. The tide is low again. Waves murmur somewhere beyond the rise of sand and grass protecting the campsite. Gulls call overhead. The smell of salt hangs in the cool air. Nearby, smoke from the morning fire rises straight upward before the sea breeze catches it. Several people are already working, not hunting, not gathering, making, improving, repairing. You sit up and watch. The older hunter from earlier sections sits near a flat stone. In front of him lies a collection of carefully chosen rock fragments. Some are dark grey, others are brown, reddish, or nearly black. Each one has been selected for a reason. He lifts a piece in one hand and strikes it with another. Tap. A thin flake breaks away, sharp enough to cut skin, sharp enough to change a life. The hunter studies the new edge, then strikes again. Slowly, patiently, a tool begins to emerge. Looking at it from a distance, you might miss what is happening. It is only stone, yet it is also planning. Memory, experience, experimentation. The difference between a poor tool and a good one can mean the difference between wasted effort and success. The difference between success and failure can mean food. And food, as you have learned many times by now, has a way of making every other decision seem secondary. Across prehistoric sites around the world, archaeologists have uncovered evidence showing that stone tool technology became increasingly sophisticated over time. Some tools were designed for cutting, others for scraping, others for piercing, shaping wood, processing hides, or preparing food. The remarkable part is not simply the tools themselves, but the knowledge required to make them. You move closer. Small flakes cover the ground around the hunter's feet. Each one catches the sunlight differently. Tiny pieces of failure, tiny pieces of success. Both are necessary. A younger member of the group sits nearby attempting the same work. The results are less impressive. One strike sends a flake in the wrong direction. Another creates an edge that is too thick. The older hunter watches silently for a while before adjusting the younger person's grip. No lecture, no dramatic speech, just demonstration. Then practice. Learning here happens through hands. A child observing nearby imitates the movements using two harmless sticks. The result is a masterpiece of complete uselessness. Still, everyone starts somewhere. The morning continues. As the tide slowly returns, people spread through the camp working on different tasks. Some repair carrying bags woven from plant fibers. Others sharpen wooden points hardened in fire. A woman uses a stone scraper to smooth a piece of bone. Nearby, another person works carefully on cordage. The entire camp feels like a workshop. Not a noisy one, a patient one. Everywhere you look, people are improving things. A handle wrapped more securely, a point sharpened more carefully, a binding tightened, a crack repaired. Small improvements accumulate, and eventually those improvements become survival. One detail hidden within many prehistoric discoveries is how often broken tools were repaired rather than discarded. Materials required effort to gather and shape. Throwing away a useful object simply because it needed work would have been wasteful. Ancient camps often reveal evidence of reuse, modification, and adaptation. You find that strangely familiar. Human beings have always preferred fixing things when replacement is difficult. The difference is that modern replacement sometimes arrives 2 days later in a cardboard box. Here it may require weeks of travel. By midday, the beach grows warmer. The sea glitters beneath sunlight. Children search tide pools while adults continue working. One little boy discovers a crab and immediately becomes convinced he has made a lifelong friend. The crab strongly disagrees. Their relationship remains brief. You sit beside a woman shaping a bone tool. The surface has been smoothed gradually using stone. She turns it carefully in the light, checking its shape. Nearby rests a piece of hide partially prepared for use. Toolmaking is rarely isolated. One tool helps create another. A scraper prepares a hide. A hide becomes clothing. Clothing allows travel into colder places. Travel leads to new resources. Resources lead to new opportunities. Everything connects. The longer you watch, the more impressive the process becomes. No written instructions exist, no diagrams, no schools, yet knowledge survives. Hand to hand, eye to eye, generation to generation. How exactly certain technological ideas spread between different prehistoric groups remains difficult to determine. Some innovations may have emerged independently in multiple places. Others may have travelled with migrating people, or through occasional contact between neighbouring communities. The pathways are often hidden, leaving only scattered clues behind. The afternoon brings a steady sea breeze. The camp grows comfortable. People work beneath the open sky while waves continue their endless conversation with the shore. You notice the variety of tools surrounding you. Some are old, some newly made, some heavily worn. Each carries a story, not written, used, a notch worn smooth by fingers, a handle darkened by years of contact, a repaired crack, a reshaped edge. The objects seem almost alive with memory. Perhaps that is because they carry pieces of human effort inside them. The older hunter finally finishes his stone blade. He holds it toward the light. The edge appears almost impossibly thin. Not decorative, practical, beautiful because it works. A younger child stares at it with admiration. The hunter smiles slightly, then hands over a much duller practice piece instead. Probably a wise decision. The afternoon passes peacefully. Several people leave briefly to gather shellfish and plants along the shoreline. Others remain behind repairing equipment. The camp feels stable today. Not permanent, never permanent, but settled, comfortable. A place where knowledge can be shared without immediate urgency. And perhaps those moments matter more than they appear. Innovation does not always happen during crisis. Sometimes it happens during calm afternoons beside the sea. Sometimes it happens because someone has enough time to try a different method, enough time to experiment, enough time to fail, enough time to try again. The sun begins lowering toward the horizon. Long shadows stretch across the beach. The tools made throughout the day are gathered and inspected. New blades join old ones. Repaired items return to use. Broken fragments are saved because even broken stone may prove useful later. Nothing leaves the camp without reason. The fire is lit again. Smoke drifts toward the water. The smell of roasting shellfish mingles with salt air. Children compare collections of shells and stones while adults prepare the evening meal. You sit near the flames and examine one of the finished tools. Simple, sharp, elegant. It feels surprisingly modern in a strange way. Not because of its appearance, because it represents the same human impulse that continues thousands of years later. Look at a problem. Think. Experiment. Improve. Try again. The sea darkens gradually as sunset approaches. Orange light reflects across the waves. Gulls settle along distant rocks. The camp glows softly behind you. You realize that the changing world has forced people to become increasingly inventive. New landscapes require new solutions. New resources require new methods. New challenges require new tools. The forest changed. The rivers changed. The animals changed. And human beings responded not only with movement, but with creativity. You place the stone tool back beside the fire. Around you, the camp settles into evening. The tide rises. The The stars begin appearing overhead, and beneath that ancient sky, people continue doing what humans seem to do best. Learning, adapting, improving. One careful strike at a time, the stories begin after the work is finished. Not immediately. First comes the gathering of fuel, then the preparation of food, then the checking of tools, then the settling of children who are somehow exhausted and energetic at exactly the same time. Only after these things are done does the camp truly grow quiet. The tide has risen since sunset. You can hear it beyond the darkness. Waves roll toward the shore and slide back again with a soft rushing sound. Somewhere farther along the coast, gulls cry occasionally before settling once more into the night. The wind has weakened. Smoke rises almost straight upward from the fire, carrying the scent of salt wood and roasting shellfish. You sit near the flames. Their light dances across faces around the camp. Orange, gold, red, the same colours you have watched in every camp since this journey began. The same colours countless people watched long before anyone imagined writing. Cities, kingdoms, or history books. A child leans against an older woman. Another rests with a head on folded hides. One boy still clutches a shell collected earlier in the day. The collection now includes shells, stones, sticks, and several items whose purpose remains known only to him. The fire crackles softly. No one rushes. There is nowhere urgent to be. And that is when the stories begin. Not formal stories. Not performances, not grand speeches delivered from a stage, simply people talking, remembering, sharing. The older man who guided the group to the spring speaks first. His voice is low. You cannot know the exact words. Time did not preserve them, yet the shape of the moment feels familiar, a place remembered, a difficult journey recalled, a warning offered, a lesson hidden inside a memory. The listeners nod occasionally. Children pretend not to pay attention while listening to every detail. This seems timeless. You watch the faces around the fire. The younger members of the group learn more than directions and survival skills here. They learn what matters, who helped during difficult times, where danger waited, which valleys held water, which animals should be respected, which mistakes should not be repeated. Knowledge moves from one mind into another, not through books, through stories. A broken stone tool can survive thousands of years beneath the earth. A footprint can harden into ancient mud. Yet some of the most important things humans ever created leave no physical trace at all. Conversations disappear, laughter disappears, advice disappears, stories disappear, and yet without them, much of survival becomes impossible. The fire pops suddenly. A shower of sparks rises into the darkness. Several children watch them climb. For a moment, the sparks resemble tiny stars moving in the wrong direction. One little girl points upward. The adults follow her gaze. The sky's clear tonight. Thousands of stars spread overhead. The sea reflects faint patches of light where the waves catch the moon. You wonder how often people sat beneath skies like this and searched for meaning among the stars. Perhaps constantly, perhaps rarely, perhaps differently from one group to another. The night keeps many of its secrets. A younger hunter begins describing something he saw several days earlier. His hands move as he speaks. The listeners laugh. Apparently the story involves an animal doing something foolish. Some things truly never change. For all the challenges of prehistoric life, humour seems remarkably difficult to eliminate. You find comfort in that thought. Even here, even now, people still tease one another, still exaggerate events slightly, still enjoy a good story. Buried among ancient cave paintings, carved objects, ornaments, and symbolic artifacts are hints that human imagination had already become extraordinarily rich. The physical evidence cannot tell us every story people told, but it suggests minds that were observant, creative, and deeply engaged with the world around them. The fire burns lower. Someone adds another branch. The flames brighten again. Light moves across the surrounding faces. For a while the conversation shifts toward the coast itself. The shellfish, The birds, the tides, the unfamiliar rhythms of the sea. Everything is being observed. Everything is being added to memory. You realize that stories serve another purpose. They organize experience. A river changes. A storm arrives. Animals move. A child asks why. A story provides structure. Not always certainty, but structure. Humans seem to need that. The sea continues breathing in the darkness beyond camp. In, out, in, out. Its rhythm blends with the voices around you. An older woman traces shapes in the sand beside the fire while speaking. Perhaps she's describing a route inland. Perhaps she's recalling a place visited years ago. Perhaps she's showing where water once flowed. The lines remain only briefly. A passing foot disturbs them. Wind softens them. Soon they disappear. Many parts of human history may have vanished in similar ways, not because they lacked importance, because they were never meant to last. A child asks a question. Several adults answer at once. This produces immediate confusion. More laughter follows. Eventually someone clarifies the explanation. The child seems satisfied. For now. The camp grows quieter as the evening deepens. One by one, younger children drift towards sleep. Their breathing becomes slow and steady. The adults continue talking softly. You notice how often names appear in the conversation. Not written names, spoken names, people who are absent, people remembered, people encountered, relationships stretching beyond the camp itself. Human life is becoming larger than immediate survival, not separate from survival, built alongside it. A shell necklace, a remembered journey, a story told repeatedly, a favourite place, an old friend, an old rival. The world contains practical needs, but it also contains meaning. The two are rarely separated. A small object passes between several people near the fire. It appears to be an unusual shell. Smooth, pale, distinctive, nothing extraordinary by modern standards. Yet everyone examines it carefully. Perhaps it was collected far away. Perhaps it reminds someone of another place. Perhaps it simply looks beautiful. Not every treasured object must be useful. That idea may be older than anyone realizes. The night grows cooler. You pull your covering tighter. The fire settles into glowing embers. Most of the conversation has faded now. Only a few voices remain. Low, sleepy, comfortable. The older man speaks once more. This time nobody interrupts. Everyone listens. The story is longer, slower. You cannot know exactly what it contains. Maybe a lesson. Maybe a memory. Maybe a warning. Maybe all three. The flames reflect in attentive eyes. The sea murmurs nearby. The stars remain overhead. And suddenly you understand something important. When the world changed for early humans, adaptation required more than tools and movement. It required memory, the ability to preserve experience, to pass knowledge forward, to tell younger people what happened before they were born. Stories became another form of shelter, another tool, another way of surviving. Eventually the final voices fade. The fire glows softly. Children sleep. Adults settle beneath hides. The waves continue their endless conversation with the shore. You lie back and stare at the stars. Around you the camp rests, yet even in sleep, something invisible continues travelling forward. Knowledge, memory, story, moving quietly from one generation to the next, just as it has for countless nights before. By morning the beach is not empty. You notice the footprints first. They appear beyond the edge of your camp, pressed into damp sand where the tide has recently withdrawn. Some belong to your group. You know the familiar pattern now. Small feet near the shelter, deeper prints where adults carried loads, a curved trail where someone dragged driftwood toward the fire. But these are different. Farther away, half softened by water, leading from the rocks toward the low dunes. You stand very still. The sea moves behind you with its steady breathing. Foam slides up the sand and pulls away again. Gulls cry overhead, sharp and restless in the cool morning air. The fire behind you burns low, sending a thin line of smoke above the camp. One of the hunters comes closer. He sees the tracks. His face changes, but only slightly. A narrowing of the eyes, a pause in breath. A hand lifting to signal quiet. Soon others gather. No one raises their voice. No one runs. The children are drawn closer to the centre of camp. Bundles are checked. Tools are quietly moved within reach. The older woman studies the prints from a careful distance, then looks toward the dunes where they vanish among tufts of grass. Someone else has passed this way. Perhaps recently, perhaps in the night. The coast, generous as it seems, does not belong only to one group. Water, shellfish, birds, driftwood, and shelter attract many kinds of life. Animals come here. Humans come here too. In a changing world, a good place may become more valuable simply because fewer good places can be trusted. You follow as several adults examine the shoreline. The footprints show more than one person. Maybe 3, maybe 4. One print is small, perhaps made by a child or a lightly built adult. Another is deep near the heel, suggesting someone carried weight. The marks lead toward a cluster of rocks where shellfish have been gathered. Some shells lie cracked nearby, freshly opened. The visitors ate here. Not long ago. You look along the shore. Nothing moves except waves, birds, and wind. Still, the feeling of the place has changed. Yesterday the coast seemed wide and open. Today it feels shared. The people around you understand what that means. Meeting another group can bring danger, but it can also bring opportunity, information, partners, mates, tools, shells, stories, routes, warnings, perhaps news of better land farther inland, perhaps news of trouble. The human world is larger than one campfire. It always has been. The evidence left in ancient landscapes hints at contacts between groups across impressive distances. Stone from one region appears in another. Shells travel inland. Pigments move. Techniques spread. These objects do not walk by themselves. Tempting as it is to imagine a very determined seashell making the journey. People carried them. People exchanged them. People remembered where they came from. The group spends the morning more alert than usual. Some continue gathering food, but always in pairs. Others stay near camp. A few watch the dunes. The children understand enough to be quiet for a while, which might be the clearest sign that something serious is happening. A little later, the first figure appears, far along the beach, small against the pale sand. Then another, then 2 more. They do not approach quickly. Your group does not move quickly either. The distance between the 2 camps becomes a kind of conversation. A careful pause, a question without words. The strangers stand near the edge of the rocks. They are dressed in hides and plant fibres, much like your group, though details differ. One carries a bundle, another holds a long wooden point, not raised, not threatening, simply present. The older woman steps forward, not alone. 2 others go with her. They leave space between themselves and the strangers. Their hands are visible. Their movements are slow. You feel your own breath become quiet. The sea continues moving as if nothing important is happening, which is very typical of the sea. The 2 groups face one another beneath the morning sky. No one knows exactly how encounters like this unfolded in deep prehistory. The words are gone. The gestures are gone. The rules of greeting, caution, kinship, and exchange vanished with the people who used them. All that remains are hints scattered through tools, ornaments, genetic traces, and shared technologies. But here, in the story, you can feel the possibilities: suspicion, curiosity, recognition, need. Maybe the strangers know this coastline well. Maybe they arrived only recently. Maybe they are hungry. Maybe they have seen the same shrinking rivers inland. Maybe their world has changed too. One of the strangers places something on the sand. A shell ornament, perhaps, or a stone, or food. It is hard to tell from where you stand. The older woman waits, then gestures to one of the people beside her. A small bundle is opened. Something is placed on the sand in return. No one rushes forward. No one grabs. The exchange happens with great care. The children stare from behind the adults. This may be their lesson today. Not how to dig roots, not how to track herds, how to meet the unfamiliar without destroying the chance of trust. Slowly the tension loosens. Not completely, never completely, but enough for more movement. Two members of the other group approach the edge of the neutral space. One points toward the north along the shore, another gestures inland, perhaps indicating water, animals, danger, or another camp. The older man from your group listens with narrowed eyes. He responds by pointing back toward the river valleys you left behind. Hands move through the air. Paths are drawn in sand. Words pass between people who may not share every sound in the same way. Meaning still finds ways to travel. You sit near the camp and watch. This is how the human world grows. Not only by walking into new land, by meeting others who have walked different paths, a technique learned, a warning received, a mate found, a story carried home, a shell traded for stone, a route remembered. Something as small as a gesture might shape the next month of survival. By midday, both groups sit apart but within sight of one another. Food is shared cautiously. Shellfish from the shore, a few dried pieces of meat from the strangers. The smell of smoke rises from two separate fires. The beach now holds two circles of human warmth, similar but not identical. You notice differences in tools. One stranger uses a scraper shaped differently from those in your camp. A young person from your group watches with intense interest. The stranger notices, pauses, then demonstrates the grip. No grand ceremony, just hands showing hands, a small moment, a possible future. The broken trail of old artifacts sometimes reveals patterns like this. Similar tools appear across wide areas, yet not always in ways that prove exactly how ideas travelled. Did people copy what they saw? Did groups merge? Did techniques spread slowly through many meetings? The answer often remains just beyond reach. Afternoon passes gently. The tide rises. Both groups move farther from the water. Children become less cautious before adults do. Naturally, they inspect one another from a distance, then closer, then begin a game involving shells and running, apparently proving that diplomacy can sometimes be handled by the shortest members of society. Adults remain watchful, but some smiles appear, small ones, brief ones. Enough. Near evening, the strangers prepare to leave. Their route follows the coast northward. Before departing, one of them gives the older woman a small object, perhaps a shell pierced for string. She offers something in return, a worked flake of good stone. Then they go, not dramatically, not with a farewell speech. They simply gather their bundles and walk along the shore until distance softens their shapes. Your group watches them disappear. No one follows. The beach grows quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. Something has changed. Information has entered the camp. Possibility has entered. The world has widened. That night the fire feels different. People speak more than usual. Gestures repeat the meeting. Children reenact the encounter with serious inaccuracies. Someone laughs. Someone corrects them. Someone else studies the new shell by firelight. You lie near the edge of the shelter and listen. The waves continue their rhythm. The stars brighten overhead, somewhere along the coast. The other group may be building its own fire, telling its own version of the day, describing you as the strangers. That thought feels oddly comforting. In a changing world, humans are not alone. Other fires burn beyond the dark. Other memories move across the land. Other hands carry knowledge you have never learned. And sometimes, when paths cross carefully enough, survival becomes something larger than one group walking by itself. A strange absence can take time to notice. At first, everything appears normal. The tide still rises and falls. The fire still burns each evening. Children still wake before adults would prefer. The wind still carries salt across the shoreline. Yet over the following days, a feeling begins to settle quietly into the camp. Something is missing. Not gone completely, just rarer, harder to find. Farther away than before, The hunters notice it first. Of course they do. They are the ones walking long distances beyond the beach, crossing grasslands, valleys, and low wooded ridges in search of signs. They see tracks, droppings, broken branches, sleeping places, migration routes, and they notice which signs are becoming uncommon. One morning, you leave camp before sunrise and follow a hunting party inland. The coast fades behind you. The smell of salt gives way to dry grass and damp earth. A pale mist lies across the lower ground. Every stem glitters with tiny droplets of water. Birds call from scattered trees. Somewhere in the distance, a fox barks once and falls silent. The world feels peaceful, almost untouched. Yet the hunters remain thoughtful. They stop frequently, not because they are uncertain where to go, because they are searching for something that once seemed easier to find. The great animals. Large herds still exist. Large prey still exists. But stories from older members of the group suggest there were once more larger groups, more frequent sightings, more certainty. You walk beside the older hunter as he studies a stretch of muddy ground near a stream crossing. The tracks are there. Several animals passed through recently, but not the ones he hoped to find. Not today. He kneels, looks, waits, then stands again. The search continues. As humanity spread across changing landscapes, people encountered a remarkable variety of large animals: mammoths, giant deer, massive bison, woolly rhinoceroses, giant ground sloths in some regions, and many others once shared the world with humans. Some disappeared gradually, others vanished more quickly. Their absence would eventually reshape ecosystems and human lives alike. You climb a low ridge. The sun rises behind you, casting long shadows across the grass. Ahead a herd grazes peacefully. Useful, important. Food, but not extraordinary. The older hunter watches them only briefly, then continues scanning farther across the landscape, looking, remembering, comparing. Perhaps he recalls stories told beside fires years ago. Perhaps he remembers seeing larger animals when he was younger. Perhaps he simply senses change without fully understanding its cause. Humans often notice patterns long before they understand them. The morning passes slowly. The hunters spread out. You follow one young tracker who moves almost silently through the grass. Every so often he crouches beside a print, touches the ground, and studies the surrounding vegetation. His concentration is impressive. Then he accidentally startles a bird and nearly jumps out of his skin. A useful reminder that even skilled people remain human. The bird seems pleased with itself. By midday, the group rests beneath scattered trees. Food is shared. Water is passed carefully from person to person. The conversation remains quiet. Much of it concerns animals, routes, tracks, memories. One younger hunter points toward distant hills where larger game may still be found. The older man listens, then nods slowly. Nothing is certain, but possibilities remain. The shadows of vanished creatures linger across prehistoric landscapes in fascinating ways. Bones discovered far from modern animal ranges sometimes reveal worlds that feel almost impossible today. Places where giant herbivores roamed valleys now occupied by forests, farms, or cities. Landscapes change. So do the animals that inhabit them. You lie back against the trunk of a tree. Leaves move gently overhead. The breeze smells of grass and sun-warmed bark. The hunters rest only briefly before continuing. Patience remains important. Large animals cannot be found by wishing. Though history would certainly be simpler if mammoths responded to polite invitations, the afternoon journey takes you across open country where visibility stretches for miles. Here the land feels enormous. Grass ripples beneath the wind. Cloud shadows drift across distant slopes. A hawk circles overhead, and everywhere there is space. The kind of space that encourages reflection. You think about the stories shared beside the fire several nights ago. The older man's memories, the changing rivers, the shifting coastlines, the wandering herds. Now another change joins the list. Animals becoming scarcer, or perhaps simply moving elsewhere? The clues remain frustratingly incomplete. Some landscapes preserve bones, others preserve almost nothing. Time keeps part of the answer hidden. What remains clear is that people adapted repeatedly as environments transformed around them. Toward late afternoon, hunters discover something interesting. Not a living animal, a skeleton, old, weathered, partially buried in soil. Several bones protrude from the ground near a dry wash. The group approaches carefully. The older hunter kneels, touches one of the exposed ribs, studies the skull. The creature was large, much larger than most animals commonly encountered now. Children would probably stare at it with wide eyes. Adults stare too, though for different reasons. The bones feel like a message from another world, a world that existed recently enough to be remembered in stories, yet distant enough to feel strange. You stand quietly among the others. Wind moves through the grass. The skeleton remains silent. A reminder, a question, a warning. No one can ask it what happened. No one can ask whether drought played a role, or changing vegetation, or human hunting, or several forces acting together. The answers disappeared long ago. Only the bones remain. The group leaves the skeleton where it rests. There is no practical reason to stay, yet the discovery lingers in everyone's thoughts as the journey back toward the coast begins. Evening light softens the landscape. Golden colours spread across the hills. The hunters move steadily. The sea breeze eventually returns. You smell salt before seeing the shoreline. The camp appears ahead. Smoke rises from the fire. Children run toward the returning hunters. Questions arrive immediately. Success, food, news. The answers are complicated. There is some food. There are signs. There are possibilities. But there is also uncertainty. The meal that evening feels thoughtful. Shellfish roast beside the fire. People sit close together. The older hunter eventually describes the skeleton. Hands gesture, shapes are traced in the air. Children listen with fascination. Some seem convinced the animal was even larger than described by the end of the story. Storytelling has always had a complicated relationship with exact measurements. Night settles round the camp. The tide moves quietly beneath moonlight. The fire glows low. You sit watching sparks drift upward. The changing world has taken many forms during your journey. Forests thinning, rivers shrinking, weather shifting, coastlines offering new opportunities. Now another pattern emerges. Some of the largest creatures are becoming less common. Their tracks appear less often. Their bones remain behind. Their stories grow larger as their presence grows smaller. The people around you do not hold meetings about extinction. They do not create scientific reports. They simply notice. Notice fewer sightings, longer searches, older memories, different landscapes. Adaptation begins with observation. It always has. The fire crackles softly. The waves continue their endless rhythm. Somewhere beyond the darkness, animals still move through the night. But the world is changing, and for the first time, you begin to sense that not every change brings something new. Sometimes change leaves empty spaces behind, spaces where familiar giants once walked. The children do not realize the world is changing. Not completely, not yet. They notice pieces of it. A river that no longer reaches the place an elder remembers. A herd that appears later than expected. A hillside that once held more trees. A shoreline where new shells appear after storms. But children rarely think in centuries. They think in mornings, in meals, in games, in the important business of finding the smoothest stone on a beach already full of stones. You wake before sunrise and find several of them already awake. The camp still sleeps beneath a pale sky. Only the fire remains fully alert. Its embers glow softly among grey ash. Thin threads of smoke drift upward into the cool air. Beyond the shelter, waves move quietly through the darkness, their rhythm steady and familiar now. The children sit near the edge of camp, watching the horizon, waiting for daylight. One of them draws shapes in the sand with a stick. Another arranges shells into careful rows. A third has somehow acquired 3 different sticks and appears convinced that all of them are essential. You sit nearby and listen. Their conversation wanders from birds to shells to crabs to whether a particular cloud resembles a fish. No one mentions climate. No one discusses migration routes. No one worries about changing ecosystems. And yet they are learning about all of those things. Every day, without realizing it. The first lessons arrive through observation. The tide rises. The tide falls. Birds gather in one place but not another. Fish appear at certain times. Storm clouds smell different from ordinary clouds. Children absorb these patterns the way dry grass absorbs sunlight. Quietly, naturally, without effort. As dawn spreads across the sea, adults begin waking. The camp slowly comes to life. Someone feeds the fire. Someone checks drying hides. Someone walks toward the shoreline carrying a woven container. The familiar rhythm returns. Yet today feels different. The older man who guided the group to the spring several sections ago sits near the fire with two young boys. He is teaching them something. Not through words alone. Through attention. He points toward the wet sand. The boys look. At first they see nothing. Then one kneels suddenly. Tracks. Small bird tracks crossing the beach. The older man nods. A lesson. The boys follow the trail for several yards before it disappears beneath the incoming tide. The lesson continues. Another track. Another clue. Another observation. Knowledge does not arrive as a single gift. It arrives one detail at a time. You spend the morning helping gather shellfish along a rocky stretch of coast. Several children come along. They move more slowly than the adults. Not because they are weak, because everything captures their attention. A shell, a feather, an unusual stone, a crab hiding beneath seaweed. The adults occasionally grow impatient. The children occasionally pretend not to notice. This arrangement appears to have worked for humanity for a very long time. At the rocks, the older woman demonstrates how to remove shellfish safely. The children watch, then try, then fail, then try again. One girl slips on wet stone and lands safely in a tide pool. The splash is impressive. Her dignity suffers more than her body. Everyone pretends not to laugh until she begins laughing first. Then the entire group joins in. The morning becomes a lesson disguised as work. Hands learn texture, eyes learn colour, feet learn balance. Memory begins storing information that may not seem important now but could matter years later. Which rocks become slippery? Which shellfish are easiest to collect? Which pools still contain water after the tide leaves? The sea becomes familiar through repetition. By midday, the sun sits high above the coast. The children gather beneath the shade of a low rise while food is shared. One little boy asks a question. You cannot know the exact words, but the gesture is clear. He points inland, toward distant hills, then toward the sea. The adults exchange glances. One of them begins answering. The explanation lasts longer than expected. Hands move. Shapes are drawn in sand. Distances are measured with gestures. The child listens carefully. You wonder how many of humanity's most important lessons began exactly this way. Not in formal teaching, not in schools, just one person asking why, and another person taking the time to answer. Far beyond the beach, clouds gather over distant hills. The older members of the group notice immediately. The children do not yet. They continue playing near the shoreline, collecting, exploring, learning without realizing they are learning. The adults notice because they have spent decades watching skies. The children will eventually learn that skill too, if enough seasons pass, if enough journeys are completed, if enough stories are remembered. That thought stays with you throughout the afternoon. Every adult here once sat where those children sit now. Every expert tracker once followed the wrong trail. Every skilled gatherer once picked up the wrong plant. Every respected elder once asked endless questions. Knowledge does not appear fully formed. It grows. The same way trees grow. The same way rivers carve valleys. Slowly. Patiently. One day at a time. As evening approaches, the camp settles into its familiar routine. The tide moves inward again. Waves erase footprints left earlier in the day. The beach becomes smooth, clean, ready for tomorrow's stories. Children help gather driftwood. Their contributions vary considerably in usefulness. One proudly carries a branch nearly larger than himself. Another returns with something that appears to be seaweed and optimism. Both are praised. Encouragement matters. The fire burns brighter as darkness approaches. Dinner is prepared. Voices soften. The sea reflects fading gold from the sunset. You sit beside the flames and watch the youngest members of the group. Some are already sleepy. Others fight sleep with impressive determination. One child leans against an adult's shoulder and slowly loses the battle. Another continues staring into the fire as if trying to understand every secret hidden inside it. Perhaps that curiosity is the most important inheritance of all. Not tools, not shelters, not roots. Curiosity, the desire to look closer, to ask questions, to notice. The changing world has challenged every generation in different ways. The elders remember one version, the adults navigate another, the children will inherit something different again. They do not know that yet. Tonight they know only the warmth of the fire, the sound of waves, the comfort of familiar voices, and perhaps that is enough. The stars emerge overhead. The tide continues rising. The camp settles into sleep. Around you, the next generation dreams beneath the same sky that guided their ancestors. Soon they will carry the stories. Soon they will remember the roots. Soon they will notice the changes for themselves. But not tonight. Tonight they're simply children. And the world, despite all its uncertainty, still makes room for that. The morning feels softer. You notice it before you fully wake. The air resting against your face is different from the colder mornings you remember from earlier in the journey. The breeze coming from the sea still carries a chill, but it no longer bites in quite the same way. Even the ground beneath your bedding seems less eager to steal warmth from your body. For a few moments you lie still and listen. Waves moving across the shore, the faint crackle of embers, someone quietly shaking sand from a hide, a gull calling somewhere beyond the dunes. Everything sounds familiar, yet something has shifted. The older people notice it too, not immediately, not dramatically, simply through years of paying attention. The kind of attention that accumulates one season at a time. One winter with less snow, one spring arriving earlier, one valley remaining green longer than expected. The changes are rarely announced. They arrive quietly, like guests who never knock. The camp wakes slowly beneath a pale golden sky. Children emerge from their bedding with tangled hair and sleepy eyes. The fire is fed. Water is collected. Shells from last night's meal lie scattered near the edge of camp, pale against the darker sand. The tide has retreated again. A broad stretch of beach glistens beneath the morning light. You walk toward the shoreline. The sand feels cool beneath your feet. Small pools left by the tide reflect pieces of sky. Tiny fish dart through clear water. Crabs move sideways between rocks. The coast seems full of life this morning. Perhaps fuller than before, or perhaps you're simply learning how to see it. The world often changes gradually enough that memory struggles to keep pace. A child points toward a patch of grass growing near the dunes. Several adults glance over. The grass appears healthy, thick, green. One of the older women pauses there later in the morning, studying it with quiet interest. She kneels and touches the stems. Nothing more. No speech. No announcement. Just observation. The sort of moment that would appear completely unimportant to an outsider. Yet many important realizations begin exactly that way. You spend the morning travelling inland with a small gathering group. The coast remains visible behind you, a silver line beneath the sky. Ahead, the landscape rises gently toward low hills. Patches of vegetation appear where only sparse growth might have existed years before. Small streams cross the land in places. Some are seasonal, some more reliable. The people around you notice everything. A cluster of flowers, fresh animal tracks, a stand of useful plants. The world is constantly offering information. The challenge is remembering it. The gathering party pauses near a marshy area. Water glimmers among reeds. Birds move through the shallows. Their reflections ripple across the surface. One young girl asks a question while pointing toward the water. The older woman answers by gesturing around the landscape. The explanation is lost to time, but the lesson seems clear. This place was different once. The girl listens carefully, then asks another question. The adults exchange amused looks. Some children gather food, some gather questions. Both habits are useful. You continue walking through the wetland. The air smells rich here. Mud! Plants, water, life. Your boots, if you had them, would be thoroughly ruined. Fortunately, nobody owns boots. The problem solves itself. The marsh supports things as do not thrive in drier ground. Birds nest among reeds. Insects fill the air with quiet buzzing. Fish move through shallow channels connecting pools and streams. The land seems busy, productive, generous, a contrast to some of the harsher places encountered earlier in the journey. You find yourself thinking about the shrinking river from many sections ago, about the dry banks, the exposed mud, the uncertainty. This place feels different. Not easier. Nothing in prehistory is especially easy, but different. As the day unfolds, several members of the group collect useful plants growing near the water. Others search for eggs hidden among reeds. Children watch carefully, and then try helping. Results vary. One child successfully gathers food. Another accidentally startles a flock of birds and spends several minutes chasing feathers through the marsh. Both experiences become lessons. The sun rises higher. Its warmth settles gently across the landscape. Clouds drift lazily overhead. The air feels almost comfortable. You sit beside a pool while others work nearby. Dragonflies skim the water. The surface reflects bright patches of sky. For a moment, the scene feels timeless. Then you remember that it is not. Nothing here is truly fixed. The coastline changes. The rivers change. The weather changes. Even this marsh may one day become something else. The people around you understand this instinctively. That understanding shapes every decision. No camp is permanent. No route lasts forever. No season behaves exactly like the last. Yet patterns still exist. Enough patterns to learn from. Enough patterns to follow. Enough patterns to survive. By afternoon, the group begins returning toward the coast. Bundles contain gathered plants. Children carry small treasures. The older woman carries information. Perhaps that is the most valuable thing collected today. Observations, memories, connections. You notice her pausing several times along the route, looking, comparing, thinking. The younger members may not understand what she sees. The elders probably do. The landscape is changing again, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. And perhaps this time the change brings opportunity. The camp appears ahead near the shoreline. Smoke rises from the fire. The sea glitters beneath afternoon sunlight. People greet the returning group with interest. Food is unpacked. Stories are exchanged. Children immediately exaggerate portions of the day. This appears to be another ancient human tradition. One bird becomes 5. One puddle becomes a lake. One startled splash becomes a heroic struggle. The adults listen patiently. Mostly, evening arrives wrapped in warm colours. The sunset spreads gold across the water. The fire burns steadily. People eat, talk, and repair tools. The atmosphere feels lighter tonight. Perhaps because food was found. Perhaps because the weather is gentle. Perhaps because the landscape seems willing to offer possibilities again. You sit near the edge of camp and watch the sky darken. Stars begin appearing overhead. The sea reflects the first pale light of the moon. Somewhere behind the dunes, the marsh settles into evening. Birds grow quiet. Insects continue their endless songs. The world feels alive. Not because it remains unchanged, because it does not. You think about all the generations who have watched landscapes transform around them. Some changes bring hardship. Others bring opportunity. Most bring both. The people gathered around this fire do not know what the future holds. They do not know how much warmer the world may become. They do not know which rivers will grow or shrink. They do not know which valleys will flourish. They only know what today revealed: more water, more plants, more signs of life. For now that is enough. The fire settles lower. Voices soften. The tide begins creeping back toward shore. You pull your covering around your shoulders and look out across the dark water. The world is loosening its grip on the cold, and somewhere within that change, new possibilities are beginning to appear. The group returns to the same place 3 times. At first, it feels like coincidence. The first visit comes after the warmer morning near the marsh, when the coast has given shellfish and the inland pools have offered plants, eggs, and fresh water. The people stay only a few nights, then move on when food becomes less easy to gather. The second visit comes many days later. You recognize the low dune before anyone names it. The same curve of beach, the same cluster of dark rocks, the same sheltered hollow where smoke once rose through the evening air. The children recognize it too. They run ahead, pointing at familiar places with the deep confidence of people who believe they discovered them personally. A shell still lies near the old fire ring, or perhaps it only looks familiar. Memory is a generous editor. The third visit feels different. By then, the route has become something more than a path. It has become part of the group's thinking. A place to return, a place to compare with memory, a place where the world can be measured against what came before. You arrive near sunset. The tide is low, exposing wide bands of wet sand that reflect the sky in muted gold. Waves roll softly in the distance. The air smells of salt, dry grass, and smoke from a fire being coaxed into life. The old campsite is still visible if you know where to look. Not clearly, not like a built house, but in small traces. A slightly darker patch of soil where ash mixed with sand. A scatter of cracked shells. A hollow where bedding once pressed the grass. A stone flake half buried near the edge of the sheltering dune. To you, it feels like returning to a room that has no walls. The group settles quickly, faster than in unfamiliar places. People already know where dry fuel may be found, where the wind is weakest, where the tide reaches at night, where children should not wander because rocks become slippery, where shellfish gather thickest when the water pulls away. Every return saves effort. Every remembered detail becomes useful. This is how a temporary place begins to feel almost like home. Not home in the later sense of walls, roofs, fields, and stored grain. Not home as an address, because sending mail here would be challenging. And also, the postal system is still having a very long nap in the future. Home as memory. Home as familiarity. Home as a place where people know what to expect, at least enough to rest. Across many parts of prehistory, groups seem to have returned repeatedly to favoured places. Sometimes those places offered water, sometimes seasonal animals, sometimes stone for tools, sometimes shelter, fish, shellfish, plants, or a combination of small advantages that made the location worth remembering. You do not need anyone to explain that tonight. You can feel it. The camp forms with quiet efficiency. One person repairs the windbreak using branches left from a previous visit. Another clears old shell fragments from a sleeping area. Children search for objects they insist they left behind, though it is unclear whether any such objects truly existed. The older woman walks slowly around the edge of camp, studying what has changed. The grass is thicker near the dune. One pool among the rocks holds more small fish than before. A patch of useful plants has spread, or perhaps it only seems that way because the season has shifted. She gathers these observations silently. The place is familiar but not fixed. That is the lesson returning teaches. A remembered place is never exactly the same place. By morning, work begins early. The tide has withdrawn under a pale sky. People move across the rocks collecting shellfish. Others go inland toward the marshy pools. A few remain at camp repairing tools and sorting old materials left from earlier visits. Nothing useful is ignored. A broken scraper found near the old fire is picked up, turned in the hand and reshaped into something smaller. The discarded flake becomes useful again. A half-burned branch becomes fuel. A previous failure becomes tomorrow's solution. The children help in their own scattered way. One carries shells, one carries water, one carries a stick with such seriousness that you begin to wonder whether it has been promoted to an official position. The day is gentle. Sunlight spreads across the sea. Gulls circle above the rocks. The wind stays mild. The group seems calmer here than it did in unfamiliar terrain. You realize that return itself can soothe people. In a world of movement, a known place offers relief. Not certainty, but something close enough. At midday, the older man sits near the old fire ring and tells a story. Perhaps he's recalling the first time the group found this beach. Perhaps he's remembering the strangers who once passed along the shore. Perhaps he's teaching the children which signs mean the tide will rise high. You cannot know the words, but you can see the purpose. The place and the story are being tied together. A child will remember the lesson because it belongs to this rock, this dune, this fire circle, this smell of salt and smoke. Memory needs anchors. Landscapes provide them. That evening, after food has been shared, the group sits around the fire while the tide comes in. Waves move closer, but not too close. People know where the water will stop. For now, the conversation drifts gently. Someone points toward the marsh inland. Someone else gestures north along the coast. The older woman draws a rough shape in the sand with a stick, marking the spring, the river, the dunes, the shellfish rocks, and perhaps the route of the strangers. The map lasts only until wind and feet disturb it. But while it exists, everyone looks. Everyone remembers. Long before permanent villages, people could still carry mental maps of extraordinary complexity, not maps on paper. Maps made from stories, smells, ridges, stones, water, stars, animal paths, and the memory of who found what in which season. You sit beside the fire and let the quiet settle around you. The camp feels different tonight. Less like survival in the immediate sense, more like continuity. The group has not stopped moving. It has not built walls. It has not planted fields, but it has begun to weave certain places into its rhythm. Return, leave, remember, return again. The world is changing, but movement is becoming patterned. The fire burns low, shells glimmer near the edge of the light. Children sleep close together, tired from the day's work and play. Adults remain awake a little longer, looking out toward the dark sea. The beach itself holds no promise that it will always remain. Storms may reshape it. The tide may claim more land. Food may become scarce. Another group may arrive. Yet tonight it holds the group gently. And perhaps that is what mattered most. A place did not need to last forever to become meaningful. It only needed to be remembered. You lie down near the familiar dune. The sand beneath the bedding still feels uneven. The sea still breathes beyond the darkness. The wind still moves softly through grass. But your body relaxes more quickly here. You know this place now, so do they, and for early humans walking through a world of constant change, returning to a known place may have felt like finding a quiet thread running through the uncertainty. Thin, fragile, but strong enough to follow. The discovery begins with patience, not with a great revelation, not with a dramatic moment that causes everyone to stop and stare, just patience. The sort that grows naturally when people spend their lives watching the land. The group has returned to the marsh several times now. The children know the paths. The adults know where the ground becomes soft. The older woman knows which plants appear first after rain and which ones linger longest when dry weather arrives. Nothing feels unfamiliar anymore, and perhaps that familiarity is what allows something new to be noticed. You arrive at the marsh shortly after sunrise. Mist rests lightly over the water. Reeds sway in the morning breeze. The air smells fresh and damp, carrying hints of mud, growing plants, and distant salt from the sea. Birds move through the shallows. Dragonflies skim the surface. The place feels alive. The group spreads out across familiar ground. Some gather roots. Some collect seeds. Others search for eggs hidden among grasses. Children wander nearby under watchful eyes. The work begins quietly. It is the sort of morning that seems almost identical to many mornings before it. Then the older woman pauses. You see her kneeling beside a patch of plants near the edge of the water. At first glance, there is nothing remarkable about them. Thin stems, small seed heads, leaves moving gently in the breeze. Yet she remains there longer than expected, watching, thinking, comparing. Eventually she plucks one stem and rolls it between her fingers. Then another, then another. The seeds fall into her palm, tiny, ordinary, easy to overlook, but she does not overlook them. The children nearby quickly lose interest. The seeds are far less exciting than frogs. The frogs win. The older woman continues studying the plants. You realize she remembers seeing them here before. Not once, many times. The same patch, the same plants, the same seeds returning season after season. Some things move, some things stay. The distinction matters. The morning passes, people gather food as they always do. Yet every so often, you notice the older woman glancing back toward that patch of plants, as if an idea has begun growing quietly in her mind. Ideas often arrive this way. Not like lightning, more like dawn. Gradual, persistent, easy to miss until the landscape is already illuminated. Later, while the group rests beneath the shade of scattered trees, she empties several seed heads onto a flat stone. The seeds scatter across its surface, small brown shapes. Nothing impressive. No one gathers around in amazement. No child points excitedly. The world continues normally. A gull flies overhead. Someone repairs a tool. A child argues passionately about ownership of a stick. Life continues, and yet the older woman keeps examining the seeds, turning them, crushing one between her fingers, watching how they fall, watching how many remain. You sit nearby and observe. The seeds seem abundant. Not everywhere, but here, in this place. Again and again, the thought lingers. A familiar place, a reliable plant, a repeated return, patterns beginning to overlap. Throughout your journey, survival has depended on movement, following animals, seeking water, searching for resources, adapting to change. Yet now another possibility appears at the edge of awareness. Not replacing movement, simply existing beside it. A place worth revisiting because something useful grows there. A child wanders over and begins helping, or perhaps interfering. The difference is difficult to determine. The older woman smiles faintly and allows it. Together they scatter a few seeds accidentally into the soil. The child immediately loses interest and chases an insect. The seeds remain where they fell, a tiny event, barely noticeable, the sort of thing no one would bother recording. Yet history is often built from moments that seem insignificant while they are happening. By afternoon, the marsh glows beneath warm sunlight. The water reflects pieces of blue sky. The reeds whisper softly whenever the wind passes through. The group works steadily. Food is gathered, bundles are filled, children become muddy, adults become patient. The usual balance is maintained. You walk along the edge of the wet ground and notice several patches of the same seed-bearing plants. Not one patch, many. The older woman notices them too. You can see it in the way she pauses, in the way she studies where they grow, where they thrive, where they fail. The landscape has become a teacher, and she has become an attentive student. As evening approaches, the group begins returning toward the coast. The journey feels familiar now. The route requires less discussion. People know where to walk, where to rest, where fresh water can be found. The children race ahead, then fall behind, then race ahead again. The adults carry food. The elders carry memory. Each contributes in a different way. The sunset paints the horizon in soft gold and pale orange. Ahead, the sea waits beneath the evening sky. Behind you, the marsh settles into quiet. Birds disappear into reeds. The water darkens. The seeds remain. At camp, the evening fire burns steadily. The smell of smoke drifts across the beach. Food is shared. Stories are exchanged. The familiar rhythm of community returns. The older woman sits near the edge of the firelight. Beside her rests a small bundle of seed heads gathered from the marsh. Not a large bundle. Not enough to transform anything. Just enough to carry. Just enough to remember. No one treats it as important. Not yet. The children are more interested in shells. The hunters discuss animal tracks. Others talk quietly about weather, tides, and routes. The seeds wait patiently. Perhaps that is fitting. Seeds specialize in patience. Night deepens. Stars appear above the sea. Waves roll gently against the shore. The fire crackles softly. You sit watching the older woman turn one of the seed heads in her hand. Thoughtful, curious, observant. Nothing has changed, and yet something has. The world that once seemed entirely dependent on following resources now hints at another possibility. A place remembered, a plant returning, a resource appearing in the same location year after year. No great discovery has occurred. No revolution has begun. Only a question. A quiet question resting beside the fire. What if some useful things could be found here again? What if certain places deserved more attention? What if memory itself could become a resource? The waves continue their endless rhythm. The stars brighten overhead. The children drift into sleep one by one. The adults remain awake a little longer. And somewhere between the marsh and the sea, between movement and return, between observation and imagination, a small idea begins taking root. Like the seeds themselves, silent, patient, waiting. Morning arrives quietly. The sea is calm. The tide has withdrawn during the night, leaving broad ribbons of wet sand that shimmer beneath the first light. Gulls drift above the shoreline. The fire has burned down to glowing embers. Thin smoke curls upward into the cool air before disappearing against the brightening sky. You wake before most of the camp. For a while you simply sit and listen. The waves, the wind, the distant calls of birds, the soft breathing of people still asleep nearby. The sounds feel familiar now, so familiar that it is difficult to remember a time when they did not. You have travelled a long way, across thinning forests, across widening grasslands, beside shrinking rivers, through storms, along coastlines, toward marshes rich with life, through landscapes changing so slowly that the transformation often revealed itself only through memory. The camp begins waking. A child emerges from a hide covering with hair pointing in several directions at once. Another immediately begins searching for a missing shell collected yesterday. Someone feeds the fire. Someone else walks toward the water carrying a container. The ordinary work of another day begins. Yet something feels different. Not urgent, not dramatic, just different. The group no longer moves through the world exactly as it did at the beginning of your journey. You notice it in small ways. People remember more places, more routes, more seasonal patterns, more sources of food. Children recognize landmarks. Adults compare one year to another. The older woman still carries a small bundle of seed heads. Not because she has decided to transform the future, because she remains curious. Curiosity often travels farther than certainty. The morning unfolds beneath a clear sky. Some people head toward the shellfish rocks. Others walk inland toward the marsh. A few remain near camp repairing tools and tending the fire. The camp itself feels more organized than before. Not permanent, never permanent, yet shaped by experience. The places where people sleep seem familiar. The best locations for fuel are remembered. The safest paths across the rocks are known. The rhythm of return has changed the way people move. A young boy runs toward the dunes and stops suddenly. He has discovered something, or believes he has. The adults look up. The boy points dramatically at a patch of plants growing near the edge of the sand. The same plants that caught the older woman's attention. The adults walk over. The children follow. The plants sway gently in the breeze. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing magical. Yet the older woman smiles slightly. The boy does not understand why. Neither do most of the others. The plants simply exist. Returning, growing, waiting. The idea resting behind them remains unnamed. Perhaps it will remain unnamed for generations. That is often how large changes begin, as observations too small to notice from a distance. The day passes gently. Food is gathered. Tools are repaired. Stories are exchanged. Children play. Adults work. The sea continues breathing beside the camp. Everything feels peaceful. Yet beneath the surface of ordinary life, something remarkable is happening. Not because anyone has discovered a secret. Not because anyone has solved every problem. Because people are adapting. Again, the forest changed. People adapted. The rivers changed. People adapted. The weather shifted. People adapted. The animals moved. People adapted. Now the world is becoming warmer in some places, wetter in others. New opportunities appear. New challenges follow. And once again, people respond. Not perfectly, not immediately, but persistently. That may be the most important part of the story. You walk inland during the afternoon. The marsh lies quiet beneath the sunlight. Water glitters among reeds. Birds move through the shallows. The familiar patch of seed-bearing plants stands where it always has, waiting. You crouch beside it. The seeds are small, ordinary, easy to ignore, and yet your entire journey has been filled with things that seemed ordinary until someone paid closer attention. A track in mud, a lowering river, a shell carried far from shore, a story remembered around a fire, a familiar campsite revisited, a patch of plants returning year after year. Human life changes through observation, through memory, through countless small decisions made by people who never imagined they are shaping history. The afternoon drifts toward evening. The group returns gradually to camp. Bundles grow heavier with gathered food. Children grow dirtier. The fire grows brighter. The sea turns silver beneath the lowering sun. You sit among the others and watch the light change. Faces glow in the warmth of the fire. The older man tells another story. Children listen. Adults listen too. The story may be old, or new, or some mixture of both. Stories often become that way. Outside the firelight, the tide begins rising again. Waves creep toward the shore, one after another, steady, patient, the same rhythm that greeted you when you first arrived at the coast. You realize that this moment contains many different worlds at once. The old world of wandering hunters, the changing world of shifting climates, the emerging world of remembered places, the future world still hidden beyond the horizon. None of the people around the fire can see that future. They do not know about villages, fields, cities, writing, roads, empires, books, or the countless generations who will come after them. They know only this evening, this meal, this fire, this tide, and perhaps that is enough. The stars begin appearing overhead, one by one, bright against the deepening sky. Children fall asleep. Adults speak more quietly. The fire settles lower. The sea continues its endless conversation with the shore. You look around the camp one final time. At the people, at the tools, at the shells, at the memories already forming. The world changed. It changed rivers, forests, animals, weather, coastlines. Yet the most remarkable part was never the change itself. It was the response. Again and again, people noticed, remembered, shared, learned, adapted. That quiet resilience carried them forward. Not for a season, not for a lifetime, for thousands upon thousands of years. The fire burns softly. The waves roll in and out of the darkness. The stars shine overhead. And beneath that vast ancient sky, a new human world is already beginning. One careful observation at a time. The fire has grown smaller now. Its brightest flames have settled into a bed of glowing embers, red and gold beneath a delicate layer of ash. Around you, the camp rests peacefully. The children sleep. The adults have fallen silent. Even the sea seems quieter than before. Waves still reach the shore, but their rhythm feels softer now, like a familiar voice lowering to a whisper. You sit for a moment longer and look across the sleeping world. The dunes, the beach, the dark outline of distant reeds, the stars scattered overhead. Everything feels calm. The journey that carried you through changing forests, wandering herds, shifting rivers, unfamiliar coastlines, and quiet discoveries has come gently to rest. There is nowhere else to go tonight. Nothing left to solve, nothing left to carry. Only the comfort of stillness. The people around the fire do not know the future. They do not know the countless generations that will follow. They do not know how many stories will grow from lives like theirs. Yet somehow the world remains connected to yours, in the warmth of a fire, in the sharing of knowledge. in the care given to children, in curiosity, in memory, in the simple hope that tomorrow will bring enough food, enough water, enough light, and enough kindness to continue. The embers glow softly. Breeze moves through the grass. The tide rises and falls. Far above, the stars continue their slow journey across the night sky. You let your eyes grow heavy. The sounds around you blend together. The sea, the wind, the fire, the breathing of a sleeping camp, everything becoming slower, quieter, gentler, and as the night settles completely across the shore, you leave the ancient camp exactly as you found it, resting beneath the stars, waiting for morning, waiting for another story, waiting for another generation to wake, look at the changing world and learn how to live within it. Sweet dreams,